Welcome to the In Search of More podcast. I am your host, Ellie Nash. Join me weekly on my quest for more from myself and more from this world. We'll see you on the other side.
Lights, camera, action.
All right, Rabbi Doniel, nice to...
Hey, Ellie Nash.
Good to see you. It's, we were talking about this earlier, but it's interesting to meet you in person and feel like I've met you a bunch of times
Yeah,
in person.
it is interesting. We both had the same line.
Yes.
Have we met before in person? Right.
I wasn't sure. If you told me we did, I would believe you.
So we did a few podcasts back in the day.
One of the earliest.
That was before you evolved into all this grandeur.
Yes.
But they were online with the Zoom ones, right?
Yeah, we're doing the Zoom webinar early COVID. When people,
Early COVID. It's like a generation ago. Right.
Yes.
Okay. Baruch Hashem, things have evolved since then.
Yeah, it was probably like May, June 2020. Like that's around that time. And you've been through a journey since as well.
We've all been through a journey.
Yes.
Many journeys.
Yes. Okay, so I did something interesting here.
Mazeh.
I went to ChatGPT and I wrote them this. I said, I'm sitting down with Rabbi Doniel Katz for my podcast. I haven't read all of this, right? So some of this we're finding
it's
out.
happening in real time.
Yeah. I'm sitting down with Rabbi Doniel Katz for my podcast, In Search of More. Give me 5 questions or topics that should really make for a good convo between us.
Is this your usual MO for podcasts?
The only other time I did something like this was I sat down with Yitzchak Pincus for kosher astrology.
Right.
But that was much different where he had written a book and I went back and forth with ChatGPT for about 30, 45 minutes. I felt like I'm going into a new area, astrology for me as a conversation.
What are the interesting parts to ask about?
Correct. So that was more of like a back and forth discussion, maybe 30, 45 minutes back and forth ChatGPT, and I had a printout and a few questions, but in general, no. Mm-hmm. In general, my MO is that I prepared my whole life for this convo.
Bring your whole self to the table. Awesome.
But let's see. So what I said was, please research both of us online and come back with some really meaningful and interesting questions. Okay. So this is what I came back with, and I have not read it.
Fastening my seatbelt.
Yeah, I have not. We're
quite curious.
We're in this together. Okay, so it says 5 honest, high-impact questions for Rabbi Doniel Katz. Okay, so we'll start with 1. We'll put the phone down, and we'll see if we get through all 5. Elevation claims to integrate Torah, Kabbalah, Hasidus, Musar, Talmud, and modern psychology into a unified system of self-transformation.
This is what they're writing a copy for my project now. Again, that's not bad.
Oh, so this is your claim?
Yeah.
I didn't. Okay,
more
perfect.
or less.
Can you unpack 1 or 2 precise examples of how this synthesis actually plays out in someone's life?
Yeah. How the synthesis. Well, first of all, we're Dorshim. We are a generation of seekers.
If I was putting that question in my words, what I would say is, it sounds nice. It's a lot of words. And it sounds
I
like
didn't
Torah.
write it. ChatGPT wrote it, right?
You said it's from your copy.
No, I said that they're writing copy for me.
Oh, they're writing copy.
Actually, my copy. Right.
Oh, okay. That you claim to integrate Torah, Kabbalah, Chassidus, Musar, and Talmud, and modern psychology. Okay, so you integrated. Beautiful.
Fine.
What's the difference in my life? Like
that's exactly. So listen, we're all seeking, and some of us are seeking. I always say in elevation, there's kind of 4 kind of souls that come to us. Someone who has physical illness, and the doctors and the medicine aren't always helping them. And they're looking, is there something else they can do with their emotions, their consciousness towards improving their immune system and physical healing? Emotional issues, trauma, kind of emotional blocks, and then looking to do emotional work. So first is the body, the guf, the nefesh. Then there's the inner emotional work, the inner emotional healing, transformation, to help the shalom bias, to help whatever blocks they have in the heart. Number 3 is kind of mental mastery. Like people who are successful out there doing things in the world, they don't identify as having trauma, being broken, but they want to deepen their love. They want to have more energy. They want to have a better mindset, a growth mindset. They want to learn how to live better, a life more richly, more deeply, etc.
It's like a peak performance.
Peak performance, okay. Number 4 is spiritual seekers. I mean, they've been to Burning Man and they've done ayahuasca and psilocybin and all those kind of titles. And they really want to just access transcendent spirituality, develop intuition. They're the true spiritual seekers. And the 5th one is, any guess what the 5th one is? It's the Jewish Torah seeker, which means that they need physical healing and emotional healing, and they want the mental mastery. They want the spiritual seeking, but they want to understand what Shabbos is and what Tefillah is and what Amunah is and what Shalom Bayis is. And they're looking to understand those teachings, but really from an experiential, transformational perspective, transformational Torah, as is a word we use frequently.
In other words, it's people practicing the
and
religion, and they want to find
don't
it
have
deeper.
the meaning or depth that it's supposed to, that was pitched to them, so to speak. And they know that it's there. Maybe they've learned some Chassidus, and they know it's all about Devekut and connection. Amun is supposed to heal them and transform them. Shabbos is supposed to be a day of hispashtus agashmas out of the body. But they don't know how to do that. They've never necessarily seen that in the community. And some of them are holding in there reluctantly. And some of them are moving away from that because they find no meaning and connection. When they go to ayahuasca or psychedelics, when they go to meditation or some app, they go, this gives me more of a feeling of calm, of peace, of connection, of yishuv das, of enuchas and nefesh than I got in those places. So then now they're on the path to try and find an integrated version of that from an authentic Torah source. So, to begin to answer the question, there's lots of different people that come to us. So I believe that the Torah, and that means...
I see myself in each of those, by the way.
Good.
In each of the 5 categories, I see
Well, you're in a
myself.
shama klali. That's why you sit here and interview all these people, because you feel like you're attuned in some way to everybody's journey and struggle. That's because there's a little bit of people within you. I'm in a shama klali as well. It takes one to know one, right? So we all connect a little bit to that. And we know we have a really profound Torah from Aaron Levi of Strashelia that says in previous generations that there was Talmidei Chachamim, there was the ones that did business and the entrepreneurs, and there was the potato farmers, the simple folk, and the big tzaddikim from the world of Atzilus. He said, but at the time of the Baal Shem Tov and onwards, there's a eskalalis, which means all those neshamas are all intermingled together. So today, we all want to be entrepreneurs and make a lot of money and change the world. We all want to be spiritual seekers and have experiences. We all want to sit on the couch and just watch YouTube all day on Netflix and be potato farmers. And there's this interesting push and pull within us that we don't really know our place. And that's part of that. We all have some of these skill sets. So coming back to our friend ChatGPT, glad to be on his podcast. Maybe I'll do yours next week if this one goes well. I think that many people are coming with different things. And the baseline of what Torah offers, which the Zohar says, the Baal Shem Tov says, is to live a life of dveykus, which means that you experience divine light and energy and blessing and profound presence in every moment. And when a person learns that skill set, to release the blocks of the heart, to heal the challenges of the body, to use more mental energy, more attention, to be more present and powerfully connected to life and Hashem in all moments, it increases the quality of life across the board. The Zohar says that all Tariag mitzvahs, all 630 mitzvahs, are 613 pieces of advice how to live in dveykus. And I think sometimes we've got all the Lego pieces, but we really don't know how to turn on the core part. It's possible, not complaining about anything, it's possible a person could be very religious, keep all the chumas, and have no connection to Hashem or even themselves emotionally, right? So what is the missing piece? I believe the missing piece is dveykus. And if you show a person how to connect to their heart and heal and release, you show a person how to connect to the light in their consciousness and live aligned with that on a practical level, not as a shkafa, but as a real living tools. So I'm blessed to see beautiful, many Talmudim students that go on that path.
Can you define or measure dveykus?
Yeah, sure. Could you measure dveykus? There's definitely studies in the realm of flow states and mindfulness, of even in psychedelics, about the core properties of higher consciousness. And there's more and more research coming out about defining the common properties of higher states of consciousness, transcendent states of awareness. And it's no longer like a few eccentric people in history that claim to have had Ruach HaKodesh or rolled their eyes back in the head. Now there's really properties that are defined, and we try and replicate them, and we see replicatable healing results, emotional transformation results from that. So there's different languages we can use. Do we want to use the language of neuroscience? Do we want to use the language of meditation and consciousness? Do we want to use the language of Kabbalah?
So I want to define it for our purposes in a way that I can understand. So when you're talking about dveykus, you're not talking about necessarily living 24 hours in a certain state. You're talking about having temporary experiences of higher states of consciousness.
Well, let's talk about that. Devekut is a spectrum, not usually the autism spectrum, but a better version of a spectrum, which means if a person, let's say, for example, has an ayahuasca experience and closes down the default mode network, the sense of I'm an individuated self separate from you, and moves into a field of awareness where you and I are deeply, infinitely connected, where I'm one with the cosmic reality, the non-dual awareness, there's bliss and connection and pleasure. That's an experience of dveykus. Now, we're not talking about psychedelics, but a lot of people today have experienced that reference point through psychedelics, and those properties are defined exactly in Chassidus and Kabbalah, obviously without the psychedelic part. Fine. So we know that there's core properties, but there's a way of a spectrum that comes down to. So rather than saying I'm in dveykus or I'm not in dveykus, I'm blowing out of my body in divine unity, or I'm sitting here stuck in the room. Let's say if right now you're feeling a little anxiety, you look pretty calm and chilled, but let's say if little anxiety, so let's say we just took down the anxiety. And let's say you're thinking about the doctor's appointment you have in an hour and a half from now, how can I manage this? So we just took that down. And let's say, life has been a little bit bumpy and you want to have a little bit more feeling of love and connection, that Hashem loves you and acceptance for who you are. So each of these kind of filters that we take away, or little energetic openings, we can start to feel like right now, as I'm talking to you, I'm doing this in my head to see if I can, putting my consciousness, I always call it the 80-20 rule, 80% on you and 20% on a kind of light and blessing and energy above me. And because my heart's clear and I have a little energy this morning, I can feel that coming into me. It's allowing me to be present and focused. There's cameras on me. It's a lot of pressure situation, but I feel connected to you. I feel present and warm. So that's the beginning of a sense of that, compared to the anxiety or frustration or control kind of energies that are dominating our conscious each day. So if you see it as a spectrum rather than a single state, the more you calm the menace, the more you release the tension, the more you build your health, your connection, the more you become a master of your mind and energy, you can attune to that. So if you give me 10 more minutes and I close my eyes, so I open up to more light, more energy, more blessing. And if I'm feeling tired because I have jet lag today, it's the third day, it's usually the worst. So then how do I center my mind? Do I go, oh my gosh, I didn't get enough sleep and I panic and now I have to be on show and I'm not going to find the words, and allow that stress to overcome me, which is a state a lot of people live in? Or can I watch that from a distance? Can I use some yichud or divine name to release that and then come back to that? And when you become a baldas, a master of that state, a master of your body, of your emotion. I'm not claiming to be a master. It's a skill set we're all working on. But the more we learn the skill sets, the more easier it is to navigate in a state of joy, of bliss, of amuna. When I'm facing a challenge, I can panic, I can get upset, I can try and control it. Or I can literally, the Baal Shem Tov literally defines amuna, faith, as dveykus. To access, faith is not something we have, it's a state that we go to. And in that place, when I was overwhelmed this morning because I didn't sleep for another night, I just kind of enter into that state. I close down my mind and I feel light and calm and guidance. Hashem's like, get out of bed now, do your learning early this morning, go to the mikveh, you'll daven a little later, and you can rest if you want. The answers are there, the guidance are there. So it becomes less and less about having a spiritual experience and more about not having to be stuck in the ego experience. But that becomes a ladder that we can more easily ascend and descend. Is that more practical definition for you?
So practically what we're talking about is slowing down and dropping in and having times, dedicated times where we do that.
Let's start with dedicated times. Like any skill set, wax on, wax off. You need an hour a day, half an hour a day, 2 hours a day to build the skill set, whether it's a retreat, whether it's a Shabbos, whatever you're doing. The more you build the skill set, the more you build the relationship with that state, with that place, with the skills, the more easy it is to drop in.
Right.
And just stay there and be there, or channel that in the middle of a discussion or meeting. That just becomes a part of your life. So you're arguing with your wife, not that you would. Okay, you're arguing with your wife, and it's been caught in this pattern for 30 years of shalom bias. And finally, rather than getting triggered, you say, 1 second, release, connect, divine name, open up to light and energy. She's the Shekhinah, Makadosh Baruch Hu, and you feel it and see that. And that radically shifts, not just your feelings.
Okay,
your
I'm clear. I understand what you're talking about. So you're saying that this state, continuously accessing this state, will improve someone's life?
Yes.
Now, you mentioned 5 different kinds of people who come to you.
Yeah. That doesn't mean there's not people that have more than one. Right. But that's a paradigm, yes.
Are you doing something different for each one, or we're going to take everyone through the same process and it'll meet you?
If you're working one-on-one with someone, you want to take them to directly the fastest path to help them deal with what they're dealing, number one. When people come in through retreats or online program, app, etc., I believe that there's foundational skill sets which everybody needs to live with more das and dveykus. And if I can give you the basic skill sets, the basic ingredients, that opens up a window to do all the things you want to do.
So the way you're describing dveykus, we can have many of those experiences in a non-Jewish setting without any of yichud, like these words. Does that make a difference?
Well, again, there's no such thing as a non-Jewish setting from Hashem's perspective.
Go ahead.
Right? I mean, you got a hand. Is that your Jewish hand or your non-Jewish hand? Is this your Jewish eyes you wore today?
You understand what I'm
I understand what you're doing, but I want to make an important distinction. If a person does breath work, so let's say when I was 23, I went to Vipassana meditation retreat. Have you heard of that?
Oh, I've heard of it.
Vipassana. Yes. It's the kind of thing you'd find fun.
Yes.
well,
it's in the Buddhist world, right?
It's in the Buddhist world. It's a 10-day silent meditation retreat. You basically inhale through your nose, exhale through your nose for 3 days, and then you scan your body for 7 days. And at some point around the 4th or 5th day, I totally blew out of my body and stayed there for a long time in a very nice way, Baruch Hashem. That was my first cosmic experience. Okay, is that a non-Jewish setting or a Jewish setting?
For the purposes of our conversation, a non-Jewish setting.
Right, because I'm learning about Buddhism. But is what happened to me a Jewish thing or a Buddhist thing?
So that's my question for you.
And the answer is, it's a reality thing. That means if you open up the Piazetzna, it says we have all these noises in our head, and if we watch them, if we become a witness to them, Das, witnessing consciousness, is literally the letters A, if you flip it around, to be the witnessing mind, the witnessing consciousness. So if I watch them, the Piazetzna says they melt away and release. And then suddenly I open up to great light and transcendence and unity within me. If me as a young, nice Jewish boy, at least young Jewish boy, and I'm on the meditation retreat, and I'm following the Buddhist practice, but the Buddhist practice is really body scanning, which is in the Piazetzna. So is that, of course, it's a Buddhist setting, but this is just a person watching and releasing identity with the ego consciousness, and then suddenly finding out there's an infinite consciousness within me. So that is not Jewish, and that is not Buddhist. That is reality, number one. The problem is that we confuse the meaning with the messenger. Then I go, wow, I access a Buddhist state of higher Dharma, of higher awareness, higher connection. Dharma is the wrong word there, you'll forgive me. So I go, wow, the Buddhist practice gets me to that state. Or wow, the path of the Buddha of alignment was true. So there's a kind of what we call a clipper. There's an identification we have that is Buddhist. But what you can do is take off the peel and leave the fruit, which is that showed me an objective thing that happens with us, is that there is a higher light of awareness, of knowledge, of realization that we carry within us. And if we can close down the mind and access that, there is light. Now, someone could call that Buddhist consciousness. Someone could call that Yoshka, the divinity within, right? And Lahavdil, Elef Havdalit. I'm not saying there's not a distinction because they can add dark energies to that. But in its purest form, I believe when a Jew accesses those states, they're accessing the light within. How they frame that, how they contextualize it, what that attaches them to when they do that is more problematic. But I believe that what I open to, I'll tell you a story. I don't know if you identify as a Chabadnik today, but I know that's part of your holy yichus. So when I came back from that retreat, I had no Jewish identification at all at the time, but it sent me off on part of the journey that got me here today. And not to attack, but just to talk about my personal journey. When I sat down, when I was starting to get into Judaism with some beautiful rabbis that opened up Tiny for me, which still today is one of my favorites from my son, Shneur Zalman. So I have a strong connection to Chabad. But I remember arguing with this Chabad rabbi, getting to around chapter 18 of the Tanya, and talking about Chokhmah and the higher consciousness and higher awareness. I remember going, I've done that, I said to him. I know this, without any ego, just like, this is describing where I was. And the line was, no, that this is really for Siddiqim. I was like, Sefer Benonim. He's like, Benoni is a very high level. I'm like, it is to get there. But I really felt with all my heart, like, this is something that people are experiencing. Without ego, this is just something, because it's not a Jewish thing, it's a reality thing. When we give it Jewish power, when we learn it from the Holy Sram, the skill set is more sophisticated and deep. We're accessing a pure version of that other than contaminated with other forces and energies. But I believe, I don't want to get into the psychedelics thing, not necessarily today's subject matter, but often I have this discussion. I've heard from, let's say, 50, 60, personally, stories of people taking ayahuasca in the Amazon, secular Jews with no Jewish Torah affiliation, blow it of their body. There's Hebrew letters, there's Rebbe Shimon, there's Lubavitcher Rebbe, there's Rebbe Nachman. Come to Israel, learn about your tradition. And these are people that didn't go to Beis Yaakov, or didn't go to the film schools. And there's something awakening within us. And for me, that's not a Jewish experience. It's about a reality that we live in. And if we access that state, there is a truth about the Shekhinah. There is a truth about our neshama and the uniqueness of our neshama. And Hashem is there drawing us all back home. So I think Torah can teach us to access that in a more pure, profound, and powerful way. I think if we do it out there, there's a risk of Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra, good and bad. But I think there's a reality. When I hear people having those experiences, it's okay for me to say that's probably a real experience, because I had that pure, real experience at a Buddhist meditation retreat, and it brought me here. I think Hashem can reach into all those places and bring us home, because this is a truth about humanity, and consciousness is as it is.
Understood. Yeah, I was asking from the standpoint of when you use the word dveykus,
Yes.
then you're including those as well. You're referencing that they could be contaminated and we could identify in different
Devekut
ways.
means moving into higher consciousness.
That's all. So if
In
that
the
exists.
in the higher spiritual world, there's shindalids, there's negative forces and energies, there's energetic tumor and kedusha.
Right, demons are spiritual too.
That's right. Isn't that nice? Isn't that comforting to realize? Demons are spiritual too. So when you cross over to that threshold, there's all kind of interesting things there to meet us. And all the Kabbalistic works like Shari, Kedusha, etc., it talks very deeply about how to navigate those spaces to draw out the good things and not to draw out the opposite. But that's part of the journey that we have to really learn to become smarter at that, wiser at that.
Can you pull at that thread a little bit, or if you're not prepared for that, in terms of things we can do in that space as a traveler in those realms?
Sure. First of all, intention is very important. And of course, connecting to Hashem, connecting to Torah. The Kabbalists say to receive Torah upon yourself before you step into that world. And what that means mystically, I don't know if there's a little too deep for the audience. In the spiritual worlds, there's also a spectrum of purity and darkness. And in that central beam of purity, there's something called Torah, which is a divine revelation. It's called the Kav of that coming into the world. When you connect to the Torah, you connect to the Tzaddikim, then when you enter into that space, you're aligning with the purer side rather than the opposite. So intention, why am I doing this? Because I want to develop, because I want to become an ayahuasca practitioner and be a shaman and get everyone to pay me a lot of money and think that I'm a supernatural being an entity. So the ego, like learning Torah, the Baal Shem Tov would say, when we're doing it because I want to be very choshevav and to impress everyone. So if you go into a psychedelic state or a meditation state of breathwork and you're thinking, I want to become the spiritual being, I want to become the spiritual guru. So that's going to allow your ego to contaminate the journey, and you'll be more open to forces that will latch onto that, will use that ego. I'm going to show them amazing insights. This is what the Tzaddikim say, even going to give this person actual Ruach HaKodesh. I'm going to tell him something that's going to happen, and it's going to blow his mind, and that's going to trip up his ego, right? So first of all, the intention is very important. The purity of heart is very important. Another thing is the more ego and emotions we have, the more we can attract energies like that. So there's an idea in Kabbalah called an ibur. An ibur means if I do the mitzvah of tzedakah and I give tremendous tzedakah, then a tzaddik who did the mitzvah of tzedakah can energetically unite with me on the same frequency and bless me and open my consciousness for success in all dimensions of my life. That's called an ibur. It's in the Kit Fairy. It's a very normal thing.
And that can just happen without someone even knowing that this tzaddik practiced that.
Right? It can be you do the mitzvah to fill and you connect in such a deep way. So tzaddikim that love that energy, they can channel through you and be connected to you. And ibur, ibur means conceived or gestated, like a period of birth. They kind of are within you, right? That also happens for the opposite, God forbid. And some of your history, I think when I talk about that with other people that have these kind of addictions, they often feel such a darkness comes over them. It's more than just an addiction. It becomes more than just a chemical thing, that they can align with such darkness that other forces, shindalids, who are connected to that energy, they can also ride into us. And that's part of the thing that they feel that they're losing control. They're losing their autonomy. And that's because those forces step in. When we step into these states through breathwork or whatever, we really want to purify our heart and intention as much as possible. We want to do tshuva. We want to say, one of the things I tell people with intuitive abilities, something I do a lot when doing meditation, especially at retreats, when I can receive information, downloads and these kind of things, as I always say, there's no information that I want that Hashem doesn't want to give me. I don't want anything from angels, from souls. If Hashem doesn't want me to have it, if I don't need to have it, I don't need to heal that person or solve that problem or get that abundance, right? If I want what's best for me according to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, not according to any other force. When you have that integrity, I'm not saying I have integrity, but we have to work on it, then you are less susceptible for anyone willing to take advantage of you. Some of many examples.
So I've noticed a few times in the conversation, you like deprecate yourself in some way. Like I'm not saying I'm this, I'm not saying that. Where's that coming from? What's the...
I don't know if it's deprecation. I realize that this subject is talking about high things that most people aren't thinking about. And when we run retreats and we're dealing with thousands of people each year, people are experiencing these things. So when I talk about it with my friends, with the students, we're talking about aren't these wonderful things that we have in our tradition, that we have in our ability to open up, like intuition. When I'm talking about you, and I don't know your audience and who they are, it sounds like I'm saying, Daniel Katz, look at all these things I can do. It sounds like I'm saying I'm a magic guru. What I'm saying is, V'ameh kulam tzaddikim, these are skill sets that the Baal Shem Tov said all of us would be able to do. So I hope I'm not deprecating myself. I don't have, but what I'm trying to do.
No, it sounds like you're cautioning something, and I just want to make sure I underline.
I'm trying to keep into context, and I'm not saying I'm a gifted guru exceptional. I'm saying these things are things that we're all involved with, and they sound perhaps a little high to people. And I'm not saying that I'm better at anything else, but this is a deep, authentic work which we're humbly involved in. That's what I'm just trying to keep that target on, keep myself on that target.
Listen, so it may be my imagination, but 4 or 5 years ago when I heard you speaking, you sounded like you had more reservation around psychedelics, and today you sound more with less reservation, right? You haven't said everyone should go do it. I want to be careful about the way I'm interpreting your words, but I definitely heard more reservation a few years ago than I'm hearing today from you.
Well, what did I say? That I'm not disagreeing, but I'm curious. What do you remember I would speak to at the time? How would I address it?
The way it felt to me, they say people won't remember what you said, but they'll remember the way you made them feel.
Sure.
So the way it felt to me was that there is the way of doing it, and then, okay, there's psychedelics, like, so you got there with a shortcut or something like that's the way it felt.
Right.
Like you got there in the second best way.
Right.
And today it sounds more, the way I'm hearing it, the feeling is that many people are finding beautiful states in this way.
Right.
Like that's all. I'm not...
Right. Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
How old are you?
40. I just turned 40.
40.
Yeah.
When's your birthday?
My birthday is Gimel Iyar.
Okay. Fascinating. Just seeing a little bit of who you are on a personal level. Beautiful. Someone said to me about you yesterday, I met our friend Mayor K at the airport. He was talking about how much he enjoys working with you. And he called you a sniper. I don't think he was saying you were killing people. That wasn't my assumption. So he said that you seem to have a skill set when working with people at retreats that you really see very deeply into people. Is that something you feel that you do?
So there's something interesting that I feel, and maybe this...
I'm not changing the subject. I'll come back to it. I'm just curious.
Maybe you resonate with this. It feels like in that space, something turns on for me.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know that it's in my everyday life that way, but in the retreats, it definitely, I feel like I step into a space where, information is more clear, and I think I'm also much more comfortable seeing something and saying something. Where in other settings, I'm not seeing, I'm not saying. I'm not.
Right. So I found that too, and I really developed it over the years. But for me, it was a very fascinating thing to be on stage in front of hundreds of people and feeling in some sense the doors are wide open. What I can put my attention on, I can see. How I can help it. It doesn't mean I have that all the time, but there's a Rebbe Nachman that talks about this. I can show you the Torah. It's a very fascinating Torah. But certain prophets had the ability that their energies and gifts would come on when they were around their students. And when they weren't, they would just be more simple people. So this is a subject. So I was watching how you're perceiving me and feeling into that a little. And I was like, okay, now I see that part of your soul. Yeah. So very nice. Now, I was not trying to avoid your question. How have my thoughts evolved around psychedelics? I'm sure there's a lot of conversations about psychedelics on your podcast. I'm sure there's people that probably have different opinions than me on the subject. I believe the path of Torah unequivocally is the path of das and consciousness. I don't believe the Baal Shem Tov was smoking crazy weed in his pipe. I don't believe the burning bush was a relevant factor in Moshe's prophecy. Not only do we have a shocking lack of real explicit tradition of that. I mean, you can say here in the pasuk is, but compared to all the other wisdom traditions that go deep into that is all the way philosophically and mythology through that tradition. We don't see that. What we see in our actual tradition is non-stop Swarm from beginning to end, like Sefer Yetzirah, like the Baal Shem Tov, like the Ramak, like the Sulam Aliyah, like Abel Afet, not only not talking about psychedelics, but explicitly going into the actual techniques they were using to get there. So a simple assessment of our tradition is, like Buddhism, we're not a psychedelic tradition, but we're a prophetic mastery of conscious tradition, number one. That just as a historical breakdown. Fine, number one. Number two is, so I believe the Tachlis HaChaim, the purpose of life, is to purify our hearts and master those skill sets and experience psychedelic states, not through medicine, but through, and running retreats around the world, I see this happening to thousands of people, and it's extraordinary, and I feel blessed to be a part of it, number one. Number two is, okay, in that context, we see psychedelics in the world. Lama, I think everything comes from Hashem. What's Hashem doing it? The free will doesn't have an issue with Ritalin. We don't have an issue with Prozac. There's medical credibility and proof of it, and people can use it. If a person is dealing with some kind of trauma or some kind of issue or some kind of block, and they are recommended to use a psychedelic substance, which we have a significant amount of data to say that can be beneficial to some people, right? And they're not doing it in a shamanistic environment. That means there's no suffix of avodah zarah. It's not Mother Ayahuasca is healing me or any of those factors. They're doing it in a professional, supportive of set and setting, which is at least neutral, if not Jewish influence, right? Then it definitely can be of some benefit to some people some of the time, right? Can it be catastrophically bad for some people? Absolutely. The first time I literally spoke about it in a class in Jerusalem, 3 people walked up to me in a room of 55 people and said they had some kind of breakdown as a result of the medicine that they took immediately after, manic episodes, etc. So it is high risk, potentially highly powerful. It can send Torah Jews both away from Torah and back to Torah ever more powerfully, and that's an interesting discussion why that is. So I take it in a more moderated perspective that there's value to it, and one of the biggest challenges of it for some people, which again, coming back to that message of confusing the meaning with the path with the destination kind of thing. The amount of people that take psychedelics that go, oh my gosh, this is what I'm waiting for, and said, Mother Ayahuasca told me to become a psychedelic healer. And that they so much identify their awakening with the medicine, and that the medicine is a solution to all things. That's certainly not Torah's approach, and that's the opposite. If a person can use an experience like that to heal, to release, to find out a little bit more about themselves, and then through that awakening, like I had at a Buddhist meditation retreat, through that awakening, B'Asher Hashem, wherever I was, there is light, there is depth, there is the connection. Now I feel a little less anxious, a little less stressed. Beautiful, okay, wonderful. So now let's learn to master those skill sets so you can integrate that for the rest of your life. So that's a little of how I see it today.
Sounds like a very balanced, healthy perspective.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Do you disagree with any of those points?
So there's one aspect which I have no knowledge of, which is the Jewish historical frame of reference, and I've heard others like Rabbi Harry, who I sat down with, and others who have a lot of Jewish references. So I don't opine. You have your.
Without getting, I'm not a person pursuing controversy. The sources just don't add up. Like I always say to these people when I've been in private rooms, consciousness and transformation, blowing out of your body experience, is totally my ballpark. It would be awesome for me if we could find the Baal Shem Tov saying, but really psychedelics. I found one explicit source that really sounds like psychedelics in the Zohar. And what it basically says is 2 of the students of Rebbe Shimon meet a person in the field working with mushrooms, and he gives them some, and it describes a psychedelic hallucinogenic experience. And they come back to Rebbe Shimon and said, what was that? And Rebbe Shimon answers, yes, these things are out there, and then basically blows them off as in not terrible and not wonderful, because they were living in those states anyway. And that for me is just the most profound statement from Torah, which is, yeah, it's a thing in the world. Don't get very excited. It's not terrible. It's a thing in the world.
Right.
So from my perspective, I would love my retreats to be, everyone take drugs and go. Why do I have to work for 4 days to bring people up into those states where you could do it in 5 minutes? So I'm as open and excited at the potential that could be, but the sources just don't add up. And without criticizing any individual, these are all good people trying to help people. When they've asked to send them the sources, you look them up, they just don't indicate what's being stated. So it just leaves most of us that know just going, okay. Like there's no source for Prozac in the Gemara. There's no source for Ritalin in the Gemara. There's no source for an iPhone in the Gemara. You don't need to say everything is in there, literal. There's Ritalin and there's Adderall, both are next to each other. We don't have to do that. We can say if this helps someone, fine. And if there's risk to it, avoid the risks. And if there's another way you can do it in a way that builds your consciousness, that's beautiful. That's our approach. So I don't think we need more than that. And I don't know why people feel the need to push that more.
I hear that. I would say I haven't seen tremendous holiness in that space, number one.
Right. Especially in
and I haven't seen that the more someone does it, the further it takes someone. But I have seen incredible, I can say for myself, and I was at this for a long time, right? So I wasn't walking along and then one day I bumped into an ayahuasca. I was doing everything I could. I had a breath work.
Everything towards healing.
Towards healing, everything I could.
Right.
For more than 10 years before I tried any medicines. And I also had a breath work, I had a coach who I did breath work with. And he helped me a lot with managing anxiety.
Mm.
When I was working with him, I always felt better after we would meet, and every session started with some breathing. Sometimes it was 5 minutes, sometimes it was 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But he was a breathwork coach, and he gave me breathing patterns to do daily. It was during a very difficult business period in my life, and he really helped me manage stress. So I bumped into these modalities that I wonder afterwards, like, why didn't they take me through the door? Because today they could, but they didn't. And it was through some ayahuasca and mushrooms and others that I saw something that afterwards I was able to access those states. Like it pushed me through it. And I've seen it over and over with many different people. And I've seen what you said also. I'm curious about your take, because I've been asked this question, is why psychedelics seem to bring some people to Judaism and some people...
I'm happy to address that. I want to address something before that. This is not me promoting something, but I want to say this as just a fascinating curiosity. When we do retreats, we just did one in Mexico, another one coming up in New York, 4 or 5 days, especially towards the 3rd or 4th day, people that have done ayahuasca and psilocybin, many of them will come and say this is equal or higher to those experiences. And they're having it only through Torah, Hasidus, a little Kabbalah. Now,
are you using breath meditation? What are you using?
All of the above.
Breath, okay.
Yichudim and divine names and some breath work, as the Baal Shem Tov says, the Rabbi Nachman says, the Abba Lafia says, just 100% of the Swarm. It takes 2 to 3 days to build up their skill set to be able to manage those things and handle it, and then they can do it. That is a fascinating curiosity to me, because when I hear a good seeking soul like yours looking for healing, and you find something in ayahuasca, first of all, I just say, Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem that stuff is in the world. Baruch Hashem, a good soul like yours that could spend another 30 years on every kind of therapy and not get anywhere, which I meet literally every week. Baruch Hashem, you got to the right place at the right time with Siyata Tishma. Beautiful. The third is, given the dangers and complexities in the world, given that even in the Torah Jewish world, without naming names or complaining, there's a tremendous amount of balagan, is a nice way to say it, of people offering that kind of medicine in Jewish spaces. Really painful and really challenging. I'm curious about, could we offer people like yourself a few years ago the same sense of breakthrough power, light, and energy that opened you up to a whole new level without having to drop you in the deep end and complexity of medicine, number one? And what would be the value of that? Well, first of all, to be able to do it in your own tradition is not just a nice thing, it's a cosmically deep thing within ourselves, number one. Number two is because the skill set and the sustainability is a game changer. Because if a person comes out of ayahuasca experience and it was profound and deep, you can't help but feeling, when's my next ayahuasca circle? Number one. There's some people some people always go, it's 6 to 12 months integration and they can do another one. But you can't help but feel that this is the path. And it demotivizes, for not all people, but many people, how deeply accessible those things are with a path that is sustainable and integratable in your life every day, that doesn't come with any of the risks or the dangers or environments around that. And that actually is what the Baal Shem Tov is saying is the path of Mashiach, is an interesting enough path. So that kind of gets my head turning and saying, well, how can we use, like, if psychedelics is kind of like a proof of product, that people can be stuck in this pattern and have a singular experience, right? So how can we now take off the risks of that particular brand and identity and find their own tradition? That makes me very curious. That's really informs a lot of my work in the last few years to see where we would take that. And I haven't answered your other question, but I just wanted to say that. You want to ask that?
I think...
By the way, we're still on AI's first question.
Yes.
Is AI going to get upset with us? That, like, I went to your podcast rather than AI's podcast. Okay.
We'll see what happens. So I think yes and no when I look at it. I don't think yes and no to that question of, like, could I have accessed it in a different way, in a healthy way. So first of all, in terms of my own use of psychedelics, there was a period where I was, I don't know what frequent means, but frequent, and now I feel less of a need to to go there. But ayahuasca was regular for me for 2 or 3 years, and I haven't for a couple of years.
Regular meaning every few months or more?
Every few months, let's say. Every few months. Right. Yeah. And usually when I could do 2, and there was a fascination. The period where I was fascinated, obsessed, I wasn't talking about it. I was like too curious, like, wow, there's something here.
Right.
And what I found is that it is somewhat self-correcting. That being said,
I don't think with all people.
Right.
You have a baldas. You try and learn and do things in a smart way.
That being said, it does help when someone is physically grounded in reality. Well, what I mean by that is when someone actually has responsibilities in the real world.
Yeah.
So someone asked me recently about their 16 or 17-year-old kid who's struggling, and there are some real risks attached to it that possibly the way they're asking the question, possibly they felt like existential risks attached to it. What do I think about doing psychedelics? And I'd be very afraid. I don't know much about that age, but I'm always concerned when someone doesn't have real responsibilities in this world to come back to. And just like had I interacted with psychedelics before I had a job and a career and children and a wife, then I could have got lost much more.
End, right.
At the end of the day, there was a bill to be paid. There was a mortgage. There was an employee. There was a vendor. I was back here, and then I had to figure out. I was forced to integrate it in a different way. But
I just want to say, you are not the majority of people. You are an exception to the rule. The majority of people that are broken by life, that are hurt, that are in pain, that are overwhelmed. I'm saying this with judgment. There's something in Chazal, in this film called the Hamoinayam, the simple folk. And I'm a kind of, don't want to get into this self-deprecating stuff, but I'm kind of caught on this. I'm trying to be sensitive to certain things. The average person that needs this work is most vulnerable to the chaos of it. For every person like yourself, who's a baldas, who's psychedelic, that tries to take responsibility, you said something very radical, which most people don't do. At the time I was most passionate with it, I kept it to myself, rather than posting on Facebook and I'm going to become a psychedelic healer, which is what a lot of people are doing, right? So that amount of das and objectivity and clear thinking is not where necessarily the majority of the world up to. Overwhelmed with their trauma, with their pain, with their history, finding it hard to function in life. The people that are often seeking healing, the people that least have the kalim to function in life in general. There's a truth to that. For every baldas that can navigate a complex space with intelligence and presence, there's many more people that get tipped over. And part of, for myself, was trying to understand that world. At the beginning, I'm hearing it from my friends. This guy's a huge entrepreneur with money, and he's a psychonaut and navigating that space, and he's doing fantastic. And then he brings in 3 of our friends, and they go to it, and they tell me about it. I'm going, this is fantastic. But then you start to see more and more of the people in the ayahuasca circles and the fulmariative in New York, and more what's happening in Israel on the side of a mountain in the middle of the night. And you start going, but the average people, it's more complex. The people who are exploring, the adoption of psychedelics on a greater scale, they all warn about this, that this was always done in more exclusive, not exclusive as in wealthy, but more focused environments for a few individuals. And once this goes mainstream to everybody, there's just so many more ways it can be abused or misused.
So that was going to be my other point, is that
right.
I don't think everyone needs to do it. I don't. What I think, in my case, I don't think if I would have come to your retreat or other breathworks, I would have broke through. I don't.
How do you know that?
I'm not saying you would have. I'll tell you why. Because of
with a lot of confidence.
The amount of resistance that was inside me to
get you to
those states, it was like I had to be pinned down, literally pinned down. So if I can open my eyes and escape, I was going to open my eyes and escape. So, but what was missing?
I don't know.
One second. But what was missing? So let me tell you what I think was missing. What was missing is that there wasn't actually that much consciousness of these ideas in the mainstream.
Right.
So when
isolated.
I'm starting to get into these states and they feel so, I'll give you an example of one of those states that scared the hell out of me. But one is that everything is a fabrication of my mind. I'm in a simulation and everything is a fabrication of my mind. And the way I understand that today is that there is a truth to that. There is a truth that like this world is not completely 100%. Real.
Chizei dehai alma is the lesson of the Zohar, the illusions of this world.
That this world is somewhat of an illusion.
100%.
So going to that state is very scary, and it can feel like I'm losing my mind.
Losing contact with what you perceive to be reality.
Yes, and anything I could have done to avoid going there, I would have avoided. But if in the consciousness and the way people spoke, and it was like, hey, these states exist. And then as I was going to it, I wouldn't have been as skeptical. So I think that there is, that's one of the changes I see now is, one of the things you said earlier on is, I don't know where where your audience is. I'm not sure either with each listener, but more and more people I think are hearing some of these ideas. It's not so foreign. It's not so
There's
crazy.
There's a change
it's not
in the avira. These ideas are much more open in the film world. They're much more open to not to give it, your podcast and 1,000 other podcasts and 1,000 people in the Jewish world that are exploring this and coming back. And elevation, we get lots of pushback in lots of ways, but the amount of openness and curiosity and awareness is totally filtering in all the surprising directions. We're still early in the game, but we've come so far. So a person like yourself today, if you were in the same place today that you were then, so you and I can have a theoretical, could you have broken through the retreat or not? But I hear that maybe not.
I think today with where it's at is possible, yes.
It's different,
yes,
because
different.
you would have heard of Jewish meditation more. You'd hear people having breathwork sessions. It's so much in the avirah that people are more curious, they're more aware of opportunities. Like someone came to me recently asking whether they should take psychedelics, a woman in the Hasidic world. She heard me talk about it on some podcast. And by the way, the reason I talk about it is not because I'm promoting it. I'm talking about it because spiritual seekers and people seeking healing in this space, these are the conversations they're having.
Yeah, you can't ignore it.
And Torah has to not only not ignore, we have to address it and speak to them rather than trying to push something under the rug.
100%.
And these are spiritual seekers having profound experiences. You agree with, you don't, but these are real experiences, fine. So for me, this was a woman that I didn't even know where to begin with her. Like I was like, I didn't recommend that to you. She said, I've heard you talk about it. I've heard people talk about it. I was like, what do you know about it? And she literally said nothing at all. I said, have you Googled it? And I don't go online. So that's kind of like an old model of someone that really literally knows nothing about it. But most of us have heard conversations. They've heard about what can happen from the perspective of neuroscience or meditations or breath work. And that means it's on the menu for more people. That means more healing is more accessible. My cousin said to me one time, he had a very difficult relationship with his father. They should both live long and be well. And it was a very difficult, strained relationship, and they didn't speak for many years. And lo and behold, Baruch Hashem, after a lot of tefillahs, like after 20 years, they literally sat together for the first time and made peace and spoke. It was very beautiful. And my cousin said, who'd gone through a lot of trauma with his father, he just said in a moment of very deep sensitivity and compassion, the previous generation never had the opportunities for healing that we have today. I don't think we're aware of how radically true that is and how profoundly different. Psychology, trauma therapy, EMT, IFS,
and just space and time.
What's that?
Space and time.
It's different.
It's different, yeah.
And isn't this what the Baal Shem Tov said when he spoke to Mashiach and said, Master, when are you coming? And he didn't say...
Yeah, the part of the song that they start the song, but they don't say the rest.
They don't say the rest. So what do they
I felt like I was duped when I saw the whole quote.
I've done that to a lot of Chabadniks and they get angry with me. That's not what it says. It's like, literally, I'm reading the words off the page. It doesn't say V'yafutzu ma'yonesecha chotza only. It doesn't just say when Chassidus goes out to the world. It says the whole world will be able to do aliyahs and yichudim.
Yes.
That's an astonishing statement. And I think if anyone with their eyes open, when we have breathwork today and when we have these experiences today and all these techniques, you see higher states of consciousness, emotional transformation, is coming, is flooding the world right on time, like the Baal Shem Tov said that it would. So a person like yourself in this generation, that's part of your work, is creating opportunities for them. It's interesting that they do have more things than they had before. And maybe because whatever path you got here, that's the gift that you get to open that up for others. That's what really happens to all of us in some way.
Yes. I do want to say this, and then we'll go to the second question. So number one, when people call me now about psychedelics, I often say that not that the shaman is not important, but I think it's the second most important person in the relationship.
The first being?
And the first being is who is the person who is the person who you're listening to on this path? Meaning, should I do another ceremony? Should I do this medicine? Like, who is that guy that's introducing you, kind of holding your hand through the process of this world? Versus the guy who's going to be there for 6 or 8 hours while you take mushrooms. I want to know about that person and why you're choosing to follow that direction.
And do people have a person like that readily available that knows them, that knows the space?
That's what I think. Right. That's what I think people should have. And the advice I always give people is find someone who has what you want. Like if someone's watching a lot of porn and they want to stop, then I'm a useful person to talk to. Someone wants a six-pack, I'm probably not a useful person to talk to. So just go talk to someone who has that. So if you say this guy knows psychedelics, the problem is a lot of people are listening to the shamans, and these guys are fully in that world. And you can go nuts from being in those spaces 4 or 5 times, however many days a week they're there. They're not fully in this planet, and they're giving you guidance from living a very, very different life. The other thing I want to say is our retreats do not feature psychedelics. We do not use it. We use rape. It's the only thing we use. We use tobacco. But other than that, we do not
100%.
use psychedelics. And we have very profound profound experiences.
Sure.
And the last point I
Wait,
want to make...
I have to jump on that, because there is this rumor we've heard from Rabbi Katz. Why are these people having these experiences at Hasidic retreats? Because they're all doing psychedelics. We have never done psychedelics at retreats. We never intend to. This is the place to explore the Baal Shem Tov's path and the Riyah Kodash's path. That's really what interests me. So just in resonance on that point.
Yes. And it was never really a topic. I mean, some for legality, obviously, right? It's important we mention that. We're talking about psychedelics, that pay attention to the legalities of it. Part of it is for that, and also, I mean, we see the profound impact we can have without it. I would say many people who come to the retreats either have done psychedelics or some go on to do it, but it's not part of it, and it's certainly not something I recommend for everyone to do. Despite the question you asked, I do intend and I do expect to do psychedelics again in the future. Meaning, even though I know I can reach these states through other ways, there are times where I feel like something is there and I just need a push.
I totally hear you. Right.
And I mean, recently I had one. There were a couple reasons I did it. One was there was a lot of stress, and I'd done things, breathworks and other stuff, and accessed some information, but I wasn't.
Right.
It wasn't moving the needle afterwards. Like during the breathwork, I'd feel something. During the retreat, I'd feel something, and I'd go back and fall into the same work pattern. And another was a physical illness, actually an ear infection that was recurring nonstop. And I did a psychedelic journey while I was on a several-week antibiotic course. And the doctor told me, we're going to try this. We're going to hit it hard with antibiotics. And if the infection doesn't go away, we're going to need to do a surgery. And the experience I had, I'll just tell you what it was. During it, I understood exactly the reason for the infection. I understood that it wasn't just in my ear. It was also connected to my throat in some way. I felt the pressure of it. And there was a lot of work done on that during the journey. Yeah. I was probably most of the way through my antibiotic course by the time that happened. It was very clear to me in that space that the infection was still active, and had I gone to the doctor then, he would have said, still there, surgery. And 3 days later, he told me,
it's fine.
He told me it's fine. That being said, it's not gone. The appointment I'm supposed to have after this to see him again, because there's still something. So I may need another one. So
there, it was an opportunity that you felt that was beneficial in some way towards a healing process.
Yeah, and I've seen it a few times with. I've seen it a few times with physical illness. I think almost, this is my read on it, is that when something comes to the level of a physical illness, like it's manifesting in a much stronger way. Like the problem can be there, and by the time it reaches physical illness, like we're at the point that it needs
stronger intervention, whatever that would be. 100%. Right. That's how it works.
I've gone into different medicine journeys not feeling well, and every single time I understood the root cause behind it. But there were certain experiences that I wouldn't have believed. I would have been too skeptical. Before.
Now I hear you.
Like that, and through certain breakthroughs, now it's, have an experience.
I've been asked a few times before, like, what is my advice when people are over the infatuation stage of psychedelics? That this is the be all and end all, it's going to heal my issues. And then they go on and say, okay, we're still here, the world is still here. Maybe I have to keep my job and my relationship anyway. If a person is practicing Chassidus in a practical way and having that, and is this just a tool that we can use sometimes in some ways, rather than saying extreme trauma therapy, nothing else is helping? Is this just something that once a year I can take and explore that for some kind of benefits? I'm not going to get caught in the darkness of it. I'm practicing dveykus in meditation. Is it just a tool that I can use sometimes? In the same way we take coffee, why can't I microdose? These kind of questions. I think that is a much more complex question from a Torah perspective. I think from an authentic, healthy, balanced Torah perspective, if somebody has a trauma or a medical issue, and there is absolutely evidence that psychedelics can help that, and nothing else has worked, and you can give that in a healthy environment, Torah, or a neutral environment at least, then from a halakhic perspective, it's hard to puzzle that straight out. I'm sure someone will, but very reasonable Rabbanim have spoken to say that it makes sense. But what about the idea of just using it as a tool sometimes when a person needs it for healing? So I think that's a, consult your local ultra-Orthodox rabbi, and I think that's tzarachin and gadol. I think there are some people that I've definitely seen not use that well. Like it just becomes an outlet every 2 to 3 weeks. And there's definitely people I see that do integrate that into every few months or when need be, and otherwise a balanced, healthy lifestyle, and they get benefit from that.
Right.
And I'm curious to see how that kind of plays out in the Jewish world and beyond.
Yeah, I think like with other things, we'll figure out how to use it appropriately. Right. Social media came onto the scene, and it's messed people up. And you'll hear even from younger kids today, probably more caution than some parents have, around it. My 13-year-old nephew, 14-year-old nephew, he was in town, and he said he wants to come here for Shabbos, and he's like, I don't want to be on TikTok all day. Right? And I was like, wow, that's like he said, I don't want to be on TikTok all day. Like that was right his own recognition, right? And that felt like something that was adult imposed, maybe 10 years ago.
Right.
10 years ago.
The awakening comes from within.
Yeah. So I think that as we start working with tools, we'll figure it out. AI being another one, but before we get to talking about
AI,
let's get to the second
AI as a question. Yes.
Number 2. Rav Katz, you walked away from an award-winning film and theater career in your mid-20s after a spiritual awakening. Mm-hmm. Then spent decades studying Torah in Jerusalem and developing elevation. What exact moment or insight made you choose Torah over artistic expression? And has any of that artist within you survived or returned through elevation?
Isn't AI interesting?
Yes.
I think it's really interesting. It's a relatively nuanced, sensitive question. It's still within the realm of AI. It's not something if you and I were having a deep heart-to-heart, you would have faced. It's still a little general and safe, but it's interesting. So again, it was, what was a critical moment of the awakening, and have I used that creativity? So if anyone wants to hear my whole story about what really crossed me the line to Judaism, we don't need to do that here. You can go to Meaningful Minute, and I tell the whole story of dveykus, right? We don't need to repeat on different podcasts, at least just to save my sanity. I definitely, when I had my first spiritual awakening and my first Jewish awakening, because I came to Israel and I had all these spiritual experiences, that the first thought that I had was, well, if Torah is true, then all the wisdom paths probably have truth to it. And now I want to put a clique together of good friends and go around the world and study everything. So my nature was always to pull back to a universalistic perspective. And Hashem really grabbed me by the back of the neck with a very profound spiritual experience, not psychedelics, and kind of said, start with Torah, go to Jerusalem and learn Torah. And there's a whole story of something that happened to me, a vision about Shabbat and having to keep a Shabbat by myself in isolation, and a whole revelation that came. So I was really, I would not, like you said about your breakthrough, it wouldn't have happened without psychedelics. I would never have, I was a filmmaker, I'd written my Hollywood feature film script, I'd won some award or two, and I was on a roll, and this kind of stuff. And I wouldn't have done the turning circle easily. I always say the bigger the truck, the bigger the turning circle. Yeah. And I was like very ambitious. I'm going to be the next Steven Spielberg, and I'm super talented, and I'm going to go there and conquer Hollywood. So it really needed a kind of spiritual whiplash to turn me in 180 degrees, and that really came in a very deep, profound way. So when I tell my story, people go, wow, you must be an amazing person to have such a spiritual experience. I was like, there's no hope for me unless Hashem grab me like that. So that's number one. So the creativity issue is a really interesting exploration for me. Like, one of the most interesting things all my life is the understanding of the creative path. I was just dealing with chronic illness for a few years in bed, and I haven't watched movies for years because I was so addicted to filmmaking. Every time I'd watch a movie, I'd have ideas, or that shot, the mise en scène, we have to write, all these kind of things would fill my head. So I went cold turkey. But when I was lying in bed for a few years, after the first tour year, I started watching videos just to keep my mind engaged. One of the things I love to watch is creative people talking about their creativity. Some composers, some filmmaker, what inspired them. And it took me years to realize that the creative path is the path of prophecy. How do you get inspiration? How does it come to you? How do you take responsibility for it? How do you navigate the world? When I first heard someone say, like, a filmmaker say something like, I felt like the difference between the script and what was unseen, I kind of got 70% of my vision. I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what it is. It's the struggle of seeing something so clearly and bringing it into reality. And how
Can you explain that? I didn't catch that. The 70%?
70% meaning when you write a film script, you have this vision of what it's going to be like. And by the time you have budgetary issues and political issues, and with the sun that was raining on the day when you had the big shoot.
The actors are human.
That's right. So between having a vision and bringing it to reality, you're a business guy, you probably know that in some degree.
Yes.
Like a million things get compromised along the way. And sometimes you can look at the end and say, great, it was good enough. And sometimes you kind of go, I lost the vision. What we produced didn't live up to what it started with. So that understanding of how do you innovate ideas? When do revelations come to you? In the shower? Why? That's very interesting. I was very interested in the path of creativity and what that involved. And later on, when I got more spiritual stuff, I realized, oh, that's because for me, it's about the development of consciousness. All of reality is about Hashem manifesting his initial vision that comes from the creation of time. So I'll tell you a funny story. When I first got to yeshiva, I went cold turkey on filmmaking. I even went cold turkey on music, because when I listened to music, that was my creative path, and I'd get visions and I'd write
So you feel like you had
scripts.
to shut it down?
I shut it down completely. When I was 24 and I first came to Israel, I didn't want to come to Israel because Israel's Jewish and I had no Jewish identity. But the Jewish identity I had was I just don't want to go to Israel because it's too Jewish for me. But I wanted to go to Israel. I wanted to go to Egypt because Egypt has pyramids and everyone knows pyramids are spiritual. So my father said to me, if you come with me to Israel, I'll let you go to Egypt. So one of my memories of realizing how addicted I was to music was I had this vision that there's a certain piece of music by Peter Gabriel, which is one of my favorite pieces of music, and I wanted to ride with a horse at sunset over to the pyramids. Like, this was the thing that I had, because like the sunrise or the sunset and the music playing in my ears. So when I got to Cairo, the first 3 days I didn't make it there. One day I was sick, and one day the tour got canceled, and one day. So I finally got there, and the sun was going down, and we got caught in Cairo traffic, and we weren't going to make it. And when we got to the gate was closed, and I missed out. And I almost started crying and screaming. And I paid a guy to take me on a horse through the desert around the back to get in. The sun's going down. And this is literally this is so embarrassing to tell this story, a last-minute, desperate attempt. This is my time to go to the pyramid. I always wanted to go. And I want this piece of music. So he's on the horse galloping towards the pyramids as the sun's already gone down. And the horse gets up to the pyramids. I missed the entire pyramids because I was trying to rewind the music and play it at the right track. And I literally had to pay him to go around and go back and again. I so much wanted the image in my head that I missed the real-time experience. That was a fun moment in my life when I realized how much I'm chasing this vision and not being present in reality. When I came to yeshiva, I dropped cold turkey filmmaking. I can tell you crazy stories about that, and music, etc. I remember one time, about a year and a half into yeshiva, in a very religious neighborhood in Jerusalem, and I was at a Shabbos table, and I was definitely in a very, I don't know if it's clinically depressed, but it wasn't a high point. I was feeling very disconnected from myself and what I was doing there. And I remember being at a Shabbos table, and a person said, well, what do you do with your days? I'm learning Torah. I said, what did you used to do? I said, I used to be a filmmaker. And then when I was talking about that, I was talking about like that was part of my essence and part of my purpose, and that creativity. And now I have no expression. And this man looked at me, this religious man, very sweet man. He said, you don't have to give it up. You could shoot wedding videos. And when he said that, I remember having this urge to literally pick up the table and just kind of turn it over. Because shooting wedding videos, which is how you make parnasa in Jerusalem, right, a boom industry, is the opposite of what it was about. Like, I used to never use video. I used to use 16mm film, because for me it was about the creativity and the depth. And it was never about having a camera in your hand. It was about channeling light and insight and gifts and vision and storytelling and taking people on journeys that are transformative. And all this is my long way of saying, it took me a few years to realize that what I do today is exactly the same skill set, but not mitlabesh in filmmaking. I innovate a new idea, which is a Torah, a teaching, a technique. I spend time writing that scripts, and I structure them with depth. There's a beginning, middle, and end on a retreat, on a class. We start somewhere, we explore what our assumptions are, we go on a journey. We are the hero of our own stories, and we enter into das and dveykus and release and heal. And taking people on a journey and communicating the depth of them and leaving them, stepping out of the show, the cinema, the retreat, totally new people and transformed with a new Weltanschauung of reality. It's literally the same skill sets I was using then. If anything, I felt more limited by film because you spent 2 years making it and 90 minutes with the audience. And now I get to spend hours with the audience and really doing the inner work. So for me, creativity kind of transcended something I identified my soul with as a filmmaker. But then Hashem allowed me, set me free to take off the filmmaking. But see, it was really yearning to elevate people's lives and take them on journeys. And that for me is more alive today than it even was then. That was a process of healing and transformation, but I feel very vitally connected to creativity and leading journeys and taking people on experiences and creating that healing, which I always wanted theater, cinema to be. It's just expressing perhaps in a truer form than ever.
I had a psychedelic journey once where the experience I was having was that I can think about someone and I can understand their life challenge.
Yeah.
And everyone who I thought about, and it was mostly family members, extended family, or people I work with, was there was either a message that their life was going to deliver. And the only choice was the only choice they had was how they were going to express it. So I'll give you an example with one. There was one person who I felt like they're carrying a billboard of "I'm alive." Okay, that I'm alive, we're alive, right? Like we're alive, we're alive.
That's the frequency that the
yes, like this is the message that they're expressing. The way it was expressed in their life was by multiple near-death experiences. So like if
they're confronting the essence of life. That's what you mean,
right? But when you're watching them, it's a reminder, like, wow, you survived that.
Right.
Like
right.
I'm talking like literal real life experience. Like you survived
life.
that. Like who has survived that? Like the person will sit in front of you and describe 10 experiences that people have died from, and you say, okay, mathematically, we're talking, let's say 25% chance, right? Someone dies from that kind of experience.
Over and over again.
And I don't know, you woke up on the side of the road, literally do not know the day of the week. Like literally do not know the day of the week is. You got up, hitchhiked, and made it back. How did that, not a limb broken, no nothing. You don't remember what you took before. You don't remember anything, right? That was your experience on a side of the road in Israel, right? There you are. Anything could have happened, right? I don't know what the likelihood of injury but someone who has 10, 15, 20 experience like this, they're carrying a billboard of "I'm alive."
Right. And
it could have been expressed maybe through, I don't know, doing podcasts about, hey, we're truly alive. We're truly alive in this moment. Right. Anyway, there was one particular person who I thought of. And so there was one was a message, and the other was someone has a gift, and will they use their gift for good or for bad? Right? Those were the two. Everyone I thought of was in these two buckets, and I can't say if it was telling me that everyone in the world is in one of these two buckets, but everyone in the world is one of these two buckets. I'm sure you've heard the saying, everyone is either a warning or a message. You hear that?
Heard it now.
Right.
It's a good line.
So this one person, and as we were speaking, was making me think about it. The way it showed it to me was clearly living in the dark side of their skill set, but an incredible ability to, let's call it, manipulate reality. And they were using it to manipulate people. And what it was showing me was like the other side of that is this, it was like someone who can create plays, create movies, create stories, and then bring people into a fantasy universe, reality. But world, it's, right? It's a fantasy, but like the message that's delivered is more powerful than...
Every film director is a god in the universe that they're creating, so to speak.
So do you feel like in some way that's been the... When you were talking, I was thinking like that kind of gift, and then the struggle of being able to use it for positive. Or
I always struggle to tell stories. Like you asked me before how I got here, and I ducked out of the story by saying in previous podcasts. There's something inauthentic for me. I'm not judging other people about telling a story. When a person has a profound experience and I relate that experience to you, that's authentic. But when you have to go on 20 podcasts and give over the story, you just start getting into the groove of telling that story again and again. So in some ways...
Start quoting yourself.
You start quoting yourself, and now I know how to make that joke.
Right.
And you become more and more disconnected from the authentic, direct experience. Mm-hmm. Like I tell a certain story about my first spiritual experience of becoming Judaism. I said to my wife a few times, I really want to stop telling that story. I ducked out of it here today.
Right, good.
Because the more you tell it, the more you're involved with the externality, and the less you remember the actual direct experience. So for me, I don't see myself as a filmmaker or a storyteller in a traditional sense. And even when I used those words originally before you asked the question, I was kind of like, that's not really what I'm about. For me, it's about seeing the depth beyond the external. That could be the depth in Torah and Chassidus. It could be the depth of 100 people in front of us or you right now. And just wanting to lean in and help birth that forward.
Is that transporting someone?
It's liberating someone, maybe. And I don't know if the nuance is lost in what I'm saying. For me, storytelling feels more like performative. Not saying that's what you were saying, but for me, there's something which is more like, let's push the stories away and let's reach into what's completely here in reality. It's almost like we're in a story and I'm trying to shake you out of the story and into the light. That's more what it feels like.
Interesting. I've watched Mayor Collinson, who I do the retreats with, go through a similar journey with his, like the performative side of him. And there was a point where he went away from that. So I'm not a performer. It's not true to me because you know, you want to hire him for this, he'll do that. You want to hire him for that. That was that period of life where he can perform and he can be in a terrible mood and he can go to a wedding and make everyone happy, right? Make cry himself to sleep that night, but he could do that.
Right.
I don't think he's capable of that today, but I've watched him go through his journey. We've been close friends for 8 to 10 years, and through the retreats, turn that on in some way, where it's a total performance, but it's like a performance with purpose.
How do you define the word performance in that context?
It's interesting to watch because I'm looking at this. I'm saying like it's performance, which we can
performance.
Do
you mean that is artificial?
It's in some way, like it's a performance.
He's turning on an energy. He's turning on excitement. He's turning on. That.
Yeah, but with a purpose. So, for example, we did one ceremony. We only did it once at the retreat. Mayor's a retreat junkie, so he's been to many over the years, and then he pulls from them.
Right.
And oftentimes we'll test one thing out. Hey, I tried this. Let's do this. So we were going to do. We had on the schedule. We had ecstatic dance, and it just didn't. The mood didn't feel like it. So he said, I once did this ceremony. It's a life ceremony. Call it a life ceremony. And when he described it to me, there was the rational part of my brain was like, this is way too gimmicky. But I've learned to trust. I trust him. I trust. This is not my. There's a reason I don't do the retreats alone. Let him do his thing.
Right.
And what he described was he was going to dress up as death, and we're going to set up a pathway with candles, and people are going to walk through their life.
One of these metaphorical experiences.
Yes, and then death is going to come.
Right.
And on the one, he's like, death is going to come, and you're walking through your life, and it was just this, like, what a bizarre thing. And he's death, and he was greeting people as death, and he had this whole outfit on and everything.
How did that go down?
Amazing.
Amazing.
Like people went through. It was first of all that like different people's reaction to meeting death was fascinating. I mean, some people are running around the Maloka, that structure to run away from him, right? Others are just like, okay, this is what it is, and there's some beautiful lesson in that. And then confronting where it ended up going into was kind of a grieving process around other close people who went through death and just confronting them. And the reason, what was the truth of it is that he was telling you he's performing. It's not like I'm dressed up as death. You don't think I'm death, right? So we're all going into this together. It's not a performance in the sense of I'm this super happy guy who's going to make you happy, but really I'm struggling with depression.
Right.
It's like, no, you know me from an hour ago and you know me in an hour. Right. And for these 2 hours, we're going to agree that I'm going to embody death, and I'm going to do it in a way that's so real that we're all going to buy into it in some way. I'm going to use those skills. Exactly. Right. So if I tried to embody death, it wouldn't have landed in the same way. But the way he steps into it and moves around, like the performance, but the difference is
ability. He has that high energy. So I mean, really, some people hear that. First of all, that's fascinating. Second of all, some people hear that thing and go, "That's shocking. How does that work?" For me, it's literally the same as, are we allowed to talk with a screener? Good. It's handy to have you around. And the AI asks the questions, but you're really on the remote control. I see how it works.
AI can't take over everything.
There you go. Good. You're still in control, man. No reason to panic. That's really all of trauma therapy is a version of that. It all works around Dimyon. And many trauma therapies, you'll say, close your eyes and imagine when you're 4 years old and your mother walked into the house. And you'll say, I'm going to be the aggressive father and go. Because they know Meir is not really death. If anything, Meir is alive. That's his energy. Okay, fine. But when Meir is playing a game, the game is to trigger emotions. Now, I'm a nice guy relatively. We're sitting here having a nice, warm conversation. If I would just scream at the top of my voice right now, I won't do that to your mic guys. Your body's still panicked. It's not like you feel I'm suddenly a threat to you. But the body doesn't know the difference between reality and something vividly imagined at the end of the day. So he's invoking an emotional response by showing imagery. We are all triggered by imagery. It's called the power of association. The word dimyon, imagination, comes from the word doimer, which means it associates one thing to another. Right. So he can stand up and play the part of death and go all in. In their heads, they're not dumb people. They don't think he's death. But the imaginative, with permission, if they give permission to themselves to enter into it, then it brings it all up. That's why it's often not breath work that's doing the healing. It's the powerful music that's evoking all the emotions. And then the breath work helps you release and pass through it. So there's all different performative, if it's the music or the voice. Sometimes as a teacher and a rabbi, you have to be chesed as a parent. Yes. And sometimes you have to be din and aggressive. And a bad parent is angry because they're actually angry. And a good parent knows how to use aggression to invoke a response. And I'm playing the part of an angry tatty. When my little kids have to yell at them, like pretend yell, I always say to my big kids, I'm going to play the angry tatty role. And they all find that very cute. Right? I can't believe you didn't put up your pajamas. Mommy said, put on your... What are you doing? Go, put them on now. I'm very, very angry. And all the kids are giggling because they know I'm playing angry tatty. So all of that just awakens emotion through the power of imagination. So that is arguably one valuable
That's pretty good.
What's that?
That's pretty
good.
Thank
you. I play an angry tatty on TV all week. So did I scare you? Do you want to get on your pajamas now? Stay as you are. It's a metaphor. So it doesn't surprise me. That's kind of almost the opposite. As I get older, I'm old enough to say as I get older, I feel more and more allergic to artifice. More and more. Rather than, I like that exercise, but I would never do that on my retreat. I like that he does it. I think that's fun. And I've seen people do those kind of tricks. In theater sports, in my background in theater, there's the kind of things that we would do. But for me, I would much rather take you straight to the higher consciousness and let it witness and process and release everything below. And the depth of authenticity, telling stories, I'm more and more allergic to do. I know I can be charismatic. I know I can turn that on. But for me, it's always been about the most authentic and present we can be, and the channels of supernatural energy that opens up. I'm not saying this about Meir, but there's always a little ego around that.
To some degree, you're doing that, right? When you're saying imagine it's tzaddik coming in or something like that, to some degree you're...
So that's a technique of prophecy, which is the idea that yardei lemakava, which you use imagination to awaken associations as a tool to instruct your higher consciousness of what to direct its energy towards. So if I imagine, there's Kabbalists that practice the technique of Ruach HaKodesh, where if you ask me a question you need help with, and they don't have ayahuasca handy, that's a joke. What they do is they imagine themselves walking, they go into dveykus, imagine themselves walking through a forest, imagine themselves walking up to a door, opening up the door, and there's a throne in the room. And on that throne they imagine a particular tzaddik. And then they ask the tzaddik the question, and they get a Ruach HaKodesh answer. Using your imagination, we attune energetically, spiritually. It's called hiskashus, to what our imagination's on. So in some ways, that's connected to the work you're saying with Meir on a deeper level. But on a simple level, I'm not trying to use the artifice of imagination for emotional stimulus, but you can use the artifice, the externality of imagination called dimyon, to actually awaken spiritual energies and consciousness. And that feels, even with Ichi Meir Morgenstern talks about that. And he says, a lot of people do some of these techniques, or they watch other people do that. How do you know that's just not your imagination? Okay, if you thought about love, you're going to feel love. And the answer is, like most people having spiritual experiences, how did you know your first psychedelic experience wasn't just imagination? The answer is, it's called hitamtut. It's called, there is a word for that the researchers have today. I'm trying to think of the word. It's a very cool scientific word. I wish I could show up and show it to you. But you know it.
Right, it's unquestionable.
It's unquestionable. If you have a prophetic experience rather than a dream, I know what a dream feels like, and I know it's unquestionable. But when you say it's unquestionable, it's not unquestionable for me. Right. How do you know you had it?
Yes.
When you're in it, you absolutely know unequivocally it is more real than real.
Yes.
Right? And so with Morgenstern says, when a person uses their imagination to awaken things, at the beginning it is imagination. The emotional stimulus from that is emotional stimulus. But when you do it properly, you literally in a moment transition to the real thing, and then it becomes reality. So that is not an example, while it is using dimyon external ideas, it's really, as the Kabbalists use that. The Baal Shem Tov says we should ascend through the worlds. And then the Kabbalists say, but we can't ascend through the worlds. The Baal Shem Tov says, B'chol makam she'adam l'chashev shamhu. You are where your thoughts are, because energetically, if you think of Yetzirah, you think of Bria, you think of the healing in the world of Bria, or the power of healing and Tiferes in the world of Atzilus, you begin to actually attune to a light and energy, which objectively is not imagination, but floods your body towards healing. So that's an example where imagination can be used to attune to reality rather than to disconnect us from reality.
Yes. Yes, I've always looked, when you find that word, please share it with me, because I've always wanted to.
It's on the tip of my tongue.
I'll ask ChatGPT later.
It's not psychosis, it's completely the opposite. Somebody help me out, someone write it in the box. I'll find it for you in a second. The second we walk out of here, I'm going to go, it's that word. fine.
No, because I've had those, and you'll tell it to someone, and it's 100%. It's 100%.
It's like
you
said
know
before,
it more than you know.
You said something completely stupid before. I was in a state and I thought about anyone and I 100%
completely crazy.
knew. How do you know? Maybe you made that up. When you're in that place, you know.
You know. And then, myself, I've had certain experiences that then connected to the real world.
Yeah.
Right? So when you have those, so someone I haven't spoken to in a long time, and I resolve something on a dispute, I resolve something with them on a journey.
Right.
And then get a phone call the next day or 2 days later, right? Stuff like that.
This stuff is really important because some people think they know and they don't know. And I always get the question, Rabbi Katz, if you get a message, how do you know it's true? How do you know if you should follow it? Actually, someone phrased it recently in a class. How do I learn to trust the messages I receive? And you know what the answer to that question is? You don't. You don't want to trust every message you receive. How do I learn to trust every business piece of advice I receive? You don't. So you use intuition like a data point. It's interesting. You say, and you filter it through your mind. Is it helpful? Is it true? Is it valuable? Can I validate it, right? And when I was developing the skill sets early on and really working hard to develop them, because I always felt I had a natural inclination, but it wasn't at all developed. So what I would do more and more of the time is if I'm talking to someone and I get a very strong download, there's this kind of cool thing today in the psychedelic space of my intuition tells me.
Right.
And I'm like, if it's your intuition, shut up and don't tell anyone about it.
Right.
Don't speak about your intuition. So my advice to people is when you're developing the skill set, don't show off it's my intuition, number one. Number two is just because something comes to you, it doesn't mean it's right, true, good, helpful, especially if you're giving advice to someone else. So my advice is I never speak it out loud. And what I always do in my head is I'll always say something like, I've received that. Let's explore that and see if that's true. The cause of this person's issue is their mother who abused them when they're 4 years old. This person I've never met, I don't know anything about their mother. Fine. Sometimes I do this, I tap 3 times, which is my way of saying, I've received that, I'm paying attention to it. Now, then I'll say, what was your relationship like with your father? What's your relationship like with your mother? Did you have a very difficult experience? Oh, really? There was abuse there. And sometimes they say she was the best woman in the world and it was the most healthy relationship in my life. And then you go, great, I don't trust that, right? I can use discernment. But the more you practice, like any skill set, the more you get to make the distinction what is true and what is not true. So always use intuitive awareness, including from psychedelics, including from everything. Take in that information, process it. How do I know that's right, true? Is it aligned with Torah? Is it aligned with myself? Is it aligned with my values? Do I think that would be a healthy outcome? Intuitive downloads also should make sense in reality. They shouldn't be divorced from reality. That's the definition of psychosis, where I think I have to do something, but really would totally derail my life in 50 ways. Good advice, good downloads make sense and is helpful in navigating life in general.
Right. You know the work of Byron Katie?
I know of it, but I haven't delved too much into it.
So it's really cool. So he calls it the work. Calls it the work. And
right.
Essentially, if someone's struggling, it's very helpful for people struggling with resentments or resentments a lot, like really, really, really good resentments. So she'll force you to kind of, or fears, right? She'll force you to put it into a sentence. I am angry at John for destroying my childhood.
And then you say, is that true?
Is it true? Is it 100% true? Right. Who would you be without that thought? And what's the opposite of it? So then you go into it. And when I first encountered it, I was like, okay, I can do this with everything. Like meaning every single thought.
Every business decision, right?
No, but even something positive. I love my wife. How do I know? Is it true?
You can deconstruct everything and lose it.
Because very often when someone, like, you'll first say, I'm really angry at this guy for destroying my childhood. Let's say a statement like that. So is it true? You say, yes, of course, he molested me. You say,
really
but are you 100% sure that's true? And it's like, well, I don't know that my childhood would have been perfect without him. You know, like like you start pushing that down.
Reframe.
Yeah,
right.
You start pushing that a little bit, and then you start. It says, imagine the opposite. Not he destroyed my childhood, so you can do all sorts of. He improved my childhood. So you test out different opposites, and you go into each one. So you can do. He didn't destroy my childhood. He improved my childhood. He made it much better, or I destroyed his childhood.
How's that beneficial?
It doesn't matter. It just you go into different. You go into opposites.
You're just trying to see
how
things
is
in
it
a
true?
different way. Okay.
Or maybe he didn't destroy your childhood. He destroyed your adulthood. Or maybe you destroyed your childhood. Right. So you go through all sorts of opposites, and you kind of say, how is that true? How is that true? How is that true? And as you start finding truths in those things, because oftentimes there is some truth in it, then it's like, oh, you can relax around that this idea that we've been holding for a very, very long time. So when I first encountered her work, I was like, okay, I can do this with everything, even a positive thing. Oh, this deal worked out. I got paid. It's amazing. How do you know it's true? It's amazing. Who said? And you just keep pushing. And then I thought, but why would I do it to something that's, like you said, that's helpful, that's making me feel good? I don't need to challenge those thoughts. It's working for me.
Right.
So I have a friend, for example, who was in and out of rehabs. I can't tell you how many times. He had an addiction to, what is it called? Like pills, different kind of pills.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, very dangerous addiction
Mm-hmm.
because obviously the prescription has risks, and people run out of prescription. You start trying street stuff and fentanyl and all sorts of other things.
Downhill.
And he was an established guy with, a family and everything else. Been into rehab more times than I can count. And eventually started working with medicines. And each time he would try, get a little reprieve for a week, go right back, a little reprieve for a little bit longer. Then he did an ayahuasca journey. And he had this incredible experience of being brought into his parents' room at the moment of conception.
Wow.
And his struggle, he articulated this to me afterwards, his struggle was, why do I have an addiction? Why do I have an addiction? I walk around, I sit in rehabs with people. This guy was abused. This guy, their father beat them. This guy, people have stories. I don't have any of these stories. It doesn't make sense. Why do I have this life of struggle? 20 years I'm struggling with this addiction. Why do I have it? And he said he brought into the moment of conception. And in that moment of conception, the father was forcing himself on his mother. That's what he experienced in it. And since that day, I'm not saying his addiction is gone, but completely different person as relates to addiction. That question has been answered.
Textbook Kabbalah and Chassidus, the intention of the parents.
Yeah, it says in Tanya, it's one of the first.
Creates a voice and brings it from the Zohar. Wow.
Yeah, so this was his experience. And you say, is it true? How do I know? You're going to prove it? You're going to call your father, call your mother?
But it shifts it.
But it
shifts
for him, it changed his relationship. He hasn't been 100% clean, but he has not had the same struggle since this.
Let it be true.
Since the story. So that's all. I have to go test it out. I have to figure it out. It's like, that's it. It is what it is. And I know many examples like this. So if something's working, don't bet the farm on it.
You can accept it. You can say thank you for it.
I do want to ask you one thing, because there's a portion of my listeners, I grew up this way, like you mentioned, Chabad. So in that world, like the truth is synonymous with the Rebbe said. And I'm not giving you my opinion of whether I think that should or shouldn't be. I'm just telling you it is. It's certainly the way I was raised, meaning it was a conversation stopper where I grew up.
Sure.
The Rebbe said X. Brain shuts down. We don't have to think. The Rebbe said. Okay, so first of all, the Rebbe was incredible. The way I always heard his stories was when someone had a gift or something, it was to nurture that and bring that back, whether it was music or other stuff, for that to be part of it. I just wanted to say sure. That. The other side of it, I've heard this, that when it came to meditation, he wasn't a fan of calling it Jewish meditation. He would say it's kosher meditation. Like the meditation is kosher. What does it have to do with Jewish?
I have a nightmare, by the way, that I'm very tired and I'm on a long podcast and somebody asked me this question. I've literally thought about it many times, and here I am living the moment. Go on.
That's your intuition.
My defenses are down, and this question gets brought up. Keep going.
That's what...
I've really thought about this many times.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what you...
Can I pass on this question?
Yeah.
I've had a very long journey with my relationship with the Rebbe. I was not brought up Chabad or religious. I was not Makarev through the Chabad world. In the Yeshivish world, they don't look fondly on all of that stuff. I found my way to the Tanya. I found my way to the Rebbe Rishab and the Middle Rebbe. I fell in love with the Torah. Until recently, I never read a Torah by the Rebbe. It just didn't speak to me. Chabad always seemed a bit of a mess culturally, without judgment, just as a reality. Profound appreciation for the things they're doing. Had too many kids that I know struggle with their journey with very common stories. And in the last period of time, I've had a really radical supernatural shift with my relationship with the Rebbe without going into too many details.
Positively.
Towards the positive. But I feel I'm kind of not supposed to speak to my concerns. And I feel like that's a sign of a pact that's in there. So I feel I should say something. And the thing that I will say is, give me 1 second. I'm being very careful. spiritually, energetically. I feel that the Rebbe had a mission, which is to save the guf, the body of Klal Yisrael. Post-Shoah, post-Holocaust, he came to a world which did not have Judaism, which the majority of people had assimilated, and he brought back the body by focusing on people's bodies. Go out there, be a shliach. Go out there, do a mitzvah. Do b'tachtonim, manifestation, physical, practical, in a way that was radically different from the 6 previous generations, which were all about meditation day and night, which were all their works. Tanya, whatever you think it is literally a book of Jewish meditation. But so many people don't know how to practice that. The Rebbe shifted radically, and I believe necessarily, the direction. And I believe there was a cost to that. And the argument would be the cost was a necessary cost to achieve the goal, which is 100% focusing on building the tefillin, the mezuzahs, the shuls, the mikvahs, the guf of Klal Yisrael. That there's not a place in the world where you can't walk into a bad place and get a good meal and get some love. And the cost was the disconnection from the heart approach, number one. And moyach being sholet adalev doesn't mean to repress your emotions, though I understand some people teach it that way today.
The Rebbe doesn't teach it that way.
Right, but people today...
Yes, that's why I was brought up in that.
Just learn Chabad and don't do the emotional stuff.
No, I was brought up in that.
I understand, and but that's just not what the Tanya says. How we get there is a long story, and I'm holding myself in a little bit. When you read what the Rebbe said about meditation, when you read the incredible supernatural ages he gave to so many people, it's very along a very particular mahalach, which is, I know this sounds ironic to people, which is chitzonius. He's building the chitzonius with tremendous genius in Ruach HaKodesh. He's rebuilding the chitzonius. But there was a tremendous loss of panemius. Now, you could argue there's a tremendous loss, but I think that's one of the moments in history when we're in the future, we look back and criticize. There was no panemius because after the Holocaust, everyone was so traumatized and disconnected they were stumbling into America. I kind of authentically believe that because the Rebbe did what he did, we can run our meditation retreats today because there's a guf now of Klal Yisrael in many ways, and now we can afford the next evolutionary step. After the death of the Holocaust, we're rebuilding the generation from the ground up, and now we're free to run our little retreat on a little podcast and talking about our little emotional worlds, right? Yeah. And so I believe that he focused tremendous energy on one part of the partzuf, the nefesh, and now it's in our ascent, aliyah towards Mashiach. Now we have to rebuild the heart and the soul. I believe that Chabad did an interesting thing, which is they somehow got disconnected from the path of the Baal Shem Tov. The aleph base of what the Baal Shem Tov taught was not taught to anyone. The experiential, simple, practical tools. And Chabad deeply needs that today to move on.
When you say Chabad, you're saying modern Chabad or from the Alter
Rebbe?
That's
an interesting question. Certainly modern Chabad, end of game. But before that, it's also interesting. So there's one other thing I feel I'm allowed to speak to, which is I think that we can appreciate what the Rebbe did with tremendous awe and respect. And that's me saying there's a total outsider and learning to just be tremendously humble towards his contribution, because I was very disconnected and frustrated by it for many years. And I believe he's coming around on it a little. I really authentically believe that he stands by the work that he did, and he completed the shlichus that he had. And you get to decide whether that was shalem or with complexities. And I believe that there's a nachas that he understands that there's an evolutionary path of his people. And now because you've built, sometimes, people come to you, I'm sure all the time, and they're stuck in the spirituality, they're stuck in the emotional, and you say to them, it was with Gedalia Fenster yesterday, it was like, get a good diet, just eat healthy. Do you know what I mean? Like build your body first, exercise, yes. and then you can start to do some of the inner work. You build the chitzonius and then the pnimius. I believe that with all the Torah mitzvahs, incredible chassidus, even as Torah is externally focused, he's not like going through. People won't understand if I say that, but it was moving towards action. He was moving toward, that was a core.
Yeah, one of his core lines was Hamaiso Waker.
Right, understood. Yes. So because of the godless of that, then we get to now, I believe, go up and higher and deeper. And I believe he appreciates that more and more. And I believe he's awakened to that more and more, whatever it means that I would say something to you like that. And therefore, I am not troubled personally. I personally don't believe, because it's nowhere in our Svarim, that every tzaddik has to be mashleim in all the bechinas. If you go to Jerusalem, you meet Ichimei Morgenstern, with Svimei Zilberberg, you meet the Abshin of a Rebbe. Shockingly to some people, they're totally different people, totally different avodas.
Right.
I understand you can think your Rebbe is Mashiach. I understand you can think your Rebbe is Tzaddik Yesod Olam. But in no scenario is your Rebbe all the Rebbes. There's an Neshama Klali, but they're different. And Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't David HaMelech, and wasn't Aaron HaKohen, and wasn't Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. They're all different expressions of the parts of. I, in tremendous awe that I didn't have, and now I deeply have, towards the Rebbe, by no means need him to be all the Shitas and all the Hishkafas. We needed him to be his thing. I understand I wasn't brought up in Chabad. I understand if I was brought up in Chabad, that would have been difficult for me, and I understand there's tremendous fallout there. From an outsider, I can be in awe of what he did contribute, but it doesn't shock me. This is all my way of saying that things along the frequency of heart, he was unbelievably insightful in helping people with love, with nurturing, with presence, but the inner avoda of the life, the inner healing of emotions, the understanding of Torah sources on Chassidus. There's things that the Rebbe can say, which shows to me just he is completely unaware of that whole field in Sugya. And I don't need him to be aware of that, because I don't think that was his tafkid in the world. If I was brought up in a home with what you said, how could the Rebbe be very right? Yeah. From the outside in. And this is why personally, Bishita, people ask me what chassid I am. This doesn't always make my children happy, but they're starting to appreciate it. I'm a chassid of the Baal Shem Tov. Like, I believe Chabad has so many riches to draw from, and Breslov has so many riches to draw from, and Kukaz, and the Kamana Rebbe, and there's so many riches to draw. And I think that's the Torah of Mashiach. The Torah of Mashiach is the Torah of liquid. You think Mashiach's going to walk and go, I was Chabad, I was Breslov, the rest of you were wrong. I was Sfardi, you lived back so wrong, and lived back the Sfardi's wrong. He's going to show the mileage in its sides. That's literally the definition of Mashiach, of Yisod, Ishbich ben Yosef, which is a liquid, and Mashiach ben David, who brings all the potential, gathers and expresses it. So for me, I'm not troubled by it, because I didn't have to live under that banner and that belief. And I believe he had a mission. He did supernatural the mission. I think if he was alive, I also would have thought Mashiach, because he was the person most likely. But it doesn't trouble me that when I hear from his biographer, I've asked him questions about the Rebbe and the research. When I read certain things, I just don't see that it was his tafkid to understand these things. He had a different tafkid. That's how I see it.
Interesting. Yeah, I can definitely see how I understand why you were careful about it. So maybe it's worth pulling it apart, because I grew up in that world. I grew up in this way, and pre-medicine.
Do you feel you're Chabad today? Is that part of your identity today?
Yeah, I would say in a lot of ways. And I feel, I didn't always feel this. I feel that if I met him in person, he would be proud, and I would be proud to step in front of him. That's why, with all this stuff.
Sure.
And pre-medicine, I had more frustration towards him than anything else. And what I realized was, I'll go to another medicine journey, where it was like, it was almost like, I need a pen and paper. And a letter started coming out of me that I felt was dictated by him.
Wow.
That's the way I felt. And there were a few different points to it. And the first was, like, kind of very rationally, I should understand this figure. Like, this person is important to my life. Let's forget whether or not, like, step one, right?
It's like rebuilding objectively. Who is this person, rather than the history?
Objectively, it's an important question to be answered.
Good.
Like, who is this person? Sure. Because my parents were both not religious, very, very different cultures. My mom's Sephardic, was culturally Jewish, Shabbos, kosher, some of the time in some ways. And then she became Lubavitch. Mm-hmm. And then my father, from a very secular American background, and together they meet, have a family. So number one, that only happens Chabad. It's a uniquely Chabad story. And then I grew up in his community, 2 blocks away from President Street and in 770 and in his yeshivas. So whoever he is, so first I often think like, what is an open mind and what is an open heart? Right? An open heart is one who's willing to feel all feelings, and an open mind is willing to think all thoughts. Like I'll go into every perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And one, I'll imagine for a few minutes, cult leader, terrible. I was brought up in a community that's darkness of dark, right? And let me go into that. Is it true? Right? Let me pull that apart and go into each possible scenario. So number one was just an invitation to truly think about this guy because I was never given permission to.
Right.
So number one. Number two, so that was the building block. The second one was everyone has got me wrong.
Everybody's
has got me wrong.
You wrong.
Him
wrong.
Him.
Okay.
In it, I wrote this. I didn't have a relationship with a Din Steinsaltz.
This is him dictating
Yes,
to you.
I didn't have a relationship with a Din Steinsaltz, but don't know me from other people. Maybe if you want to read a Din Steinsaltz book on me, maybe. Like that's what I thought. I said like maybe him, but for everything else, you want to know who I am? Learn me. Like learn. So in there, I made a commitment for a while. I was doing it more, but to learn his sichas, and I got great enjoyment.
How did that go?
Very well.
How did your understanding of him shift through that process?
Oftentimes I felt like I was connecting. It was in different ones. Some of the ones are more dense. I didn't feel it as much, but in some of the ones like broader, more conceptually, I felt like I was connecting to someone with a very bold personality, someone who like really pushed the envelope, wasn't afraid, like a fearless and a never enoughness, but in a
that's for sure.
Almost, maybe a good way. I don't know. Like there's a part of it that can feel like a little
bit too much.
Go see a doctor. I mean, like this is like what's going on.
Right.
And the way I felt that in it is sometimes it was like a question and an answer that I felt was fully resolved in the second chapter of a sikha, and he kept going for 8 more. And I was like, your question was resolved fully. Like there was no need to.
He was overwhelming.
Yeah, it was sometimes it was like this overwhelming energy, but there was a beautiful boldness and compassion that I connected to, and I still do. It's a completely different relationship. And over the years, I've gotten messages at the right time, in weird ways,
right,
from him. I had once, I was about to sell a house, and a friend says, he's like a spiritual guy, no medicine. He says, I'm being bugged, and I understood what I'm being bugged. I was like, this thought is in his head that he can't shake to share this letter with you. He had no idea I was selling my house. He had like no idea of any of that. And it was like breaking down the dangers of downgrading a home, like selling a home and downgrading. And the home I was going to move into was a downgrade. It was larger footprint, but downgrade. And
the letter was from the Rebbe?
It was a letter from the Rebbe that a friend shared with me and said, he said, I'm being bugged to share this with you. I got this letter about 10, 11 a.m. My house was on the market. By 5:30, I had an offer on my house. My house was on the market for a while. I had an offer on my house that I was going to sell, and I already bought another house that I was going to move into. Had I not got this letter, I would have countered to that offer. I wouldn't accept. I would have countered, which if he would have accepted, I would have received, and I would have ended up moving into this house. And it was like very, very strong caution. Chazal says, the point wasn't even like, I didn't feel like it was an individual point. It was a logical point, like logically making a spiritual point. Chazal says 3 things affect the expanded consciousness of a person. Mm-hmm. Beautiful home, beautiful kalim, and a beautiful wife. And he was talking to someone who was selling a house for debt. That reason was because of to get out of debt. So he made the point about the debt, which is not as relevant to me. But this point was, and based on that, I took an instruction not to. So what I'm saying is, there were moments in the past few years where I felt a nudge one way or another.
So I have to tell you, first of all, it's a beautiful story just to hear. You can hear with all my ums and ahs about responding, the Rebbe is supernaturally present in a way that some people will turn off this video now and go, you got to course him. This is all part of Judaism, and it's all part of our tradition. The Rebbe Nachman is very present. There's a few tzaddikim that are very present. So I also felt that the Rebbe came after me in the work I was doing and wanted to get his 2 cents in, and one time he gave me very strong musa, which shattered me, and then 2 years later, in a very supernatural way, he came to make up and show me that he wants to support me and open up things in a very supernatural way. So without going more into it, it's a real thing. It's a real thing. And Rabbi Nachman also is very busy in our generation for the people that connect to that frequency.
Right.
He's very busy coming to a lot of people, guiding people. And this is a key part of tradition. So besides hearing the beautiful story, I'm also hearing the Rebbe is still also looking for leaders. He's looking for people, and he's trying to guide. He's trying to help out now in the same way. In Kabbalah, there's a tradition that what tzaddikim do when they're alive, they continue to do after they pass.
Even more, I think.
Even more.
Yeah. Yeah, so I've definitely felt that, and I've definitely felt challenged at different times, and also a powerful push on my... powerful push on the back.
So
I was doing a few years ago a 3-part webinar with Yossi Jacobson called Tackling Taboos.
I think I saw that.
And in the first
you
one...
spoke about the Rebbe?
No. But we discussed different subjects. I don't know why I brought this up, but I think it's connected. And it was very clear after the second, do not do the third. And the third was going to be on psychedelics. Like 2 hours, very, very robust.
Mm-hmm.
His position, my position on, and it was very, very clear. Like, do not go there.
From the Rebbe?
Wherever it came from, do not go there. It was...
It's a very fascinating... I mean, these are the things that... I would love to talk more about these things. I do them with a lot of... I mean, when I'm talking about the tzaddikim guide us, and they're coming, and it's a very real part of our lives. It's a very real part of my life. There's infinite stories to tell. And I think it's a very beautiful, rich part of our tradition. I mean, the Rebbe himself would go and speak to the Frierdiker Rebbe and ask Eitzes and, over there. It wasn't just something we do for the Rebbe. That was a part of their tradition. It went all the way back, and the Tzaddikim would do that. Rabbi Nachman would speak by the Baal Shem Tov's kever and ask him questions and get Eitzah, and that's in Kitfi Ari, and this is in the Kuntres Stadtkus is talking about these things. And I believe more and more these are part of the things that will come out more and more.
So this is what I'm talking about when I spoke about psychedelics and how it wasn't something I could have broken through. I'm actually talking about these kind of conversations, which is, it's like for us to talk about these kind of things 10 years ago, I feel like we would have been considered certifiably insane. What are you talking about? A nudge from the Rebbe? Well, at the same time, people are calling themselves like part of a mystical tradition. Like the whole thing was like your head can explode from trying to make sense of someone's perspectives on these ideas. Check your mezuzahs when you have a problem. And it's like, okay, this is very practical because this one the Rebbe said enough times. So it's like, okay, we're just going to do it. And the amount of times you find connections. I had a break-in at my office, check all over mezuzahs, the whole place. Check all over mezuzahs, the one on the door, the word, it was a few words, but the first word that was bad, uvisharecha. Right? And like that was the one door that the break-in happened, like the stuff. So you see these stories, right, over and over, but somehow those things are like, we've become attuned to it, and then we hear the word energy, and it throws us off. It threw us off, and that's where I was when I started the path, and that's what I'm saying. So listening to a conversation like this 10 years ago, I said we're both nuts, we're both hallucinating. What are you talking about? And then when people have enough experiences, and I have a breathwork experience where I have a conversation with my grandmother, and she shares something with me, and I'm like, I swear I had that conversation. I don't know what to tell you. And then I look afterwards. Right, at the time, I wasn't like attuned to Hebrew dates. I look afterwards, and her yard site was like the next day. It was like, these are weird occurrences that more and more people are having those experiences. So when enough people are hearing this, and it's in the zeitgeist, in the culture, it's like, oh, okay.
Right. And even more so, 100% with what we're saying. And part of my work is to bring that out and mainstream that, show it's a reasonable part of our tradition. The profound pain and sense of cognitive dissonance is when people who are having these experiences are going back to people who are Torah Jews, who are immersed in Chassidus, which talks about this stuff from beginning to end, and brings these to the table and feel that they are not heard, not accepted, that they're rejected. We had a retreat in Mexico a few months ago. What happened in the room for those 4 days, particularly one day when we did healing techniques based on the Baal Shem Tov, if I would tell you the supernatural healings that took place, Malachim coming to people, talking about it, like there was just a sense in the room that if we went home and talked about what 240 of us experienced, people would think we're nuts. And there's one rabbi that kind of called me up and said, like, what are you doing? And I went through what people experience. It's like, is it delusional? It's like I'm literally following the instructions from this farm that you teach. I understand you teach Torah from the Baal Shem Tov, but on this page there's a yichud. On this page he talks about healing. Right? We are children of prophets. There's something weird that happened. that we lost the prophecy, even though we're children of prophets. We forget that our tradition of Torah and mitzvahs is a supernatural, direct download, transcendent experience tradition. And we understand what happened in the Gemara when they took away the Avodah Zarah for the Avodah Zarah, and we lost the power of Nevuah, and we understand that's coming back in the end of days. But without criticizing in an overgeneralistic way, as a culture of Torah Jews, we've profoundly lost all deep sense of spiritual sensitivity to the reality. So if a tzaddik comes to you, that's Avodah Zarah. And if healing happens, that must be Avodah Zarah. And even though these things are literally in every page of our tradition, and even though these are the powers we're told will lit by the Baal Shem Tov, will actually come back at the end of the days, and all the tzaddikim say that, it seems to be that when Jews are brought up in a Torah environment, and they're like yourself, spiritually seeking, maybe because they've got trauma, maybe because they're deeper souls, and they discover these things, when they come back, often they feel like they get slapped, they get rejected. That's not accepted. I understand that what you're saying is, I agree, it's more and more accepted, it's more and more discussed.
Yes,
right?
It's less.
But it's painfully not in some ways. And there's I have Rachmanus on the Torah Jews about this, because I think this is just, we are all culturally, historically in a kind of fight and flight freeze response after 2,000 years of holocausts and pogroms and expulsions, etc. And I think when a person's in fight and flight mode, the body takes away the blood and the energy from brain, from like higher sophistication, thinking and processing, and goes into survival mode. And I feel that as a culture, we are waking up out of survival mode now. And now we can indulge in our breathwork sessions and our 5-day elevation retreats and all these kind of things. But there's still a slow, painful response for many. I know many people that come back from retreats and they kind of sometimes get slammed because they go back and tell their rabbis, the teachers, and they say, that's impossible. That must be Avodah Zarah. No, we literally learned from the Baal Shem Tov. Here it is. Can't be that you can do that. We literally can. So I think in some ways it's happening, the awakening is happening. In some ways it's painfully slow. And I think what we are doing is we've lost certain vital nutrients of our tradition, which were there on the page all the time. And I think that's starting to be reconstituted. There's one of my teachers that says that Torah itself goes into Gullus. Phil Nagana teachers say this. And the Torah of transformation and prophecy is in exile. And those sparks are coming back. And at beginning, this is what the Kabbalists say, they look foreign to us. But the more they come back, and the more we integrate them, we see these parts of ourselves that we lost all the time. Just like when we're dealing with our own emotions or trauma, that anger, that pain, that's foreign. And that's actually a part of my desire for boundaries or joy or to stand up for myself, my fight that I need to reintegrate. And I think the energy, the avirah is changing and in a wonderful way, but there's also, it can be slow and painful and frustrating that people come back with the power of their own tradition and they kind of get rejected by those that know it best. And that itself can be a kind of a re-traumatizing experience for some.
Right. I hear that. I definitely hear it. I mean, it's in some ways my own experience. Many of my family members have been very skeptical about my own path. But I think that more and more people are coming on board.
100%.
And people who've been very skeptical of this criticized me. And I'll give you an example. I had a conversation once with a well-known rabbinical figure on psychedelics, right? In person. Very, very, very skeptical. Super skeptical. He had a family member struggling with pornography, and he called me. I didn't recommend psychedelics. He didn't do psychedelics. Right. But my point is that there's a cognitive dissonance there, right? At the same time, he can disagree with me so passionately about psychedelics, but then when there was an issue, he's like, I don't know what to do. This guy's coming to me. He's a frum guy with a family. Right. He's struggling watching way too much pornography. Like maybe this guy can help him. The same guy who you disagree with on something 100%. In this space, not on a side deal, like in this field and in this arena. And I've had unbelievable conversations with people about it. It could be painful. We always tell people after retreats, just like easy on who you share these things with. Yeah. Especially like the when you go into these things like sharing a life ceremony and it was impactful, it can sound super, super vague. But other times, through a breath work or a meditation, whatever it is, right? Someone goes to a different state and has a realization or an awakening of sorts and goes back home in that vulnerable state and wants it to be received in the same way. It's like, careful who you share it with. Not everyone is deserving of these experiences. That being said, there was one guy who knew I was interviewing you, big fan of yours, gone to your work. He said he said if I was able to ask Rav Katz a question, I would ask him why.
Wait, this is not AI.
I know why he's he's like, I love his work. I'm such a big fan of it, and then I hear him defending himself. Like, why does he he almost felt like it was you stooping down by defending
because of the recent messages that we sent out.
Yeah, he's like, I've sat in his spaces. Like, I don't need you to defend me.
Well, clearly he's not the person we're speaking to.
Right. So that's my question. I've defended myself as well, so I want to hear your. At times, I've defended myself. Like, what would you tell him? To him,
if I'm on a podcast and someone says the following question, which you didn't say, how has the film world accepted your work? Until recently, my answer has been, it's a beautiful process and there's many people that are open and this kind of stuff. A shift has happened within me in the past, literally few weeks, where I don't feel that's the most helpful response anymore. There's been more and more people that come at us with all kinds of crazy, irrelevant attacks, which are just nonsensical and baseless, that refuse to meet or dialogue, won't even meet with us. There's no sources of what he does. I have pages of 500 sources I would like to send you right now. I don't want to look at your sources because anyone can type anything. Well, I mean, at least look at it. No, I'm not going to look at it. And then the word comes out, all the rabbis in that city wanted to meet with Rabbi Katz, but he refused to meet with them. And I've literally been on the phone to all of them saying, I'm happy to meet with anyone, right? So my kind of sense of the way that you handle these things, is with humility. This is some kind of nisan, I have to handle it, right? But then there is things that are going out which are called not lashon hara but matzi shemon that are just wrong. And I'm not talking about anything because in our generation, me too, you have to clap. I'm just talking about that there's no sources or he's using psychedelics or there's no rabbis behind it. This is the things I'm talking about. But they will stop their communities going to it or really come out in really awful ways. There's one person that went to all our donors and cut off the donors. Donors wouldn't speak to us again. All on this kind of stuff. Now, I've tried to say, how do you navigate this stuff as a mensch? How do you navigate this stuff as a mensch? How do you navigate this stuff with the moon? Why is Hashem doing this? People that step into our classes and step into our retreats, they know we are good, this is beautiful, this is meaningful and helpful, etc. And it's always been around us. The people, we're doing something that a lot of people go, Kabbalah, Hasidus, red flags, prophecy, emotional transfer, healing. He thinks he can heal cancer. Who is he? I've never claimed I can heal cancer. People find healings because we follow what the Baal Shem Tov says, right? We never personally tell anyone I can heal anything. I'm not a healer, but dveykus can be, and let's explore and experiment together without any promises. But it triggers a lot of red flags for people, number one. Number two is, recently, more and more, over the last few years, a few times, and in the last few months and weeks, a few times, really awful things. People have cut us down. And more, I've just started to question, as an empathic person, when people are not nice around you, you kind of take it on yourself, and then you say, I'm going to ignore it, and then I'm going to have faith. There's this famous rabbi who is well known. I won't say who he is, but is well known and respected as a big kahila, and he lectures, whatever. And somebody went after him publicly and released all these videos about him, whatever, and tried to take him down. So when I was having some of these issues behind the scenes, I turned to a friend and said, what should I do? He said, well, what about him? Speak to him, get advice from him. So I've never met this person. My sense is he wouldn't like what we're doing anyway. He's a little too lit fish for art to appreciate what we're doing. I sent him a nice text message saying, I've heard you, I'm going through certain challenges. Some people are spreading this kind of noise about us. It's affecting students because A, students don't come, and B, students that love it are starting to think it's treif.
Right.
And that's what breaks my heart. That's what breaks my heart, because this could be really helpful, and you're parceling someone. So this rabbi responded to me, you have to ignore it. You have to put your head up high. You have to believe in a Kadosh Baruch Hu, and gave me this beautiful chizikdik speech. And I sat with that and said, you're right. And a day later, I was like, would you never legally do something? And I asked him, he said, oh yeah, I have a lot of wealthy donors in my Kehillah, and they took them to court. And I was like, so why did you give me the Musa shmooze and not say you also took care of it from a legal cease and desist and you took care of it? So it started making me go, maybe there's a point when you clarify things, not defensively, not on the attack. I'm not talking to those rabbis and those fearmongers. I don't care about them.
You're talking to your members.
I'm not the members who are on the inside. They don't believe in that stuff anyway because they see this is good and valuable and helpful and true. I'm talking about the people which I am speaking to all the time, We really want to come to your event. My mother and father's shalom bayis was transformed. My father overcame this emotional block for years. But now we've been told that this is not okay. Apparently there's no sources from what you're saying. It's all psychedelics, and this is just a cult of charisma that you're creating, blah, blah, blah. So then I was like, if you don't, there's a term in secular language which is control the narrative, right? You get ahead of the game and control the narrative. So I'm not talking spin doctoring, but if there's an authentic, humble counter response, and these people aren't willing to address it, they're not only willing, I had to through a second person. When I was in yeshiva, if the Rosh Yeshiva gave a shmooze, you could walk up with a makor and ask a question what he said. That was encouraged. If I didn't do that, the Rebbe would come over to me and say, why aren't you talking to me? If you want to puzzle someone out there in Kiev, so mechaziking many, many yidden, and you won't even have a dialogue with them, you won't even find out. You literally said the words to another Rav, I don't want to look at his makors because anyone can type anything. You could, but maybe I'm just saying what's shown on the page. Then it leaves us with no path of interaction. So when talking it out with the Rebbe, it's like, what if I would just respectfully, warmly, with a little bit of sense of humor, address the questions that are being asked? And I really feel that this is, what's the story? You know this better than me. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, the whole family got into that legal battle.
Over the books, yeah.
And I don't know if this is true, but I heard this from two different people. He took them to court in a secular court. Is that correct?
It was resolved in a secular court. I don't know who is the plaintiff and who is the defendant.
So I was told by someone, so this may be inaccurate, but I was told that the Rebbe did it dafka in a secular court to create a psak din in the tachtonim, and that this was a strategy. Whether that was someone's interpretation, I heard this from a kosher person.
Yeah, it would be very easy to check because it was certainly a court case.
Right.
And the Rebbe's wife was deposed or testified in court.
I heard that this was a shita that is used sometimes because halakhically it's not pashut to take someone to a secular court. Now, what I want to say is I'm attuned to these things and I feel this. There's certain dinim that are coming against us without saying more about it because what we're doing is radical. Ari Kaplan spoke about this. If you remain in the boundaries of Kedusha, all the sides are formed. But if you push on the front lines, then there's pushback energetically. So I thought, when talking with my people, I was like, let's just stop putting out into the ether with joy, right? Not to those rabbis who are not listening and not to the inner people, just what is our response to certain claims? Just how would we address them? What our perspective? And I can go through what some of them are. Doniel Katz is just getting rich, teaching Kabbalah, claiming he can cure cancer. So we respond, what are we doing and what are we teaching and what are the sources and what claims do we make and here's the evidence. Now, I got a bunch of people, including saying, why are you being so defensive? Why are you feel need to defend? There's nothing you're doing wrong. But what we also got was hundreds and hundreds of messages of people going, thank you. I didn't know. I wanted. Someone messaged this to me. Because I think what we're doing is kind of out of the box in a lot of places, it triggers people. And rather than judging us favorably or looking into it, just like most people do, they have groupthink and they go kosher or treif, yes. Right? A voda zara. So we thought, let's just counter that. Now, I can't tell you yet what the sum, value, and lust was on that. But what I can tell you is literally hundreds of people said, that was really helpful, and I could take that back to my rabbi or back to my teacher. Now I do want to come on the trip. I do want to come on the retreat. And I'm still curious about how you fight that kind of aggressive katnus and hisnagdus when it's said about you quietly, but those rabbis don't even want the headache of bringing it into a public space. They're happy to get you banned off a platform or not invited to a forum or something. But there's an idea in Chassidus and Kabbalah, which I think about a lot, is clippers work, dark forces work when they're hidden. And when you bring them to light, the disinfectant of the sun, they can't survive. Rabbis don't mind kvetching about us quietly. The line you said I've seen many times. It's treif, it's nothing. My son's going off the derech. Can you please help them?
Right.
I was told that would happen. I've seen it happen many times. Necessity is the mother of invention and acceptance and radically new ways of thinking. I think it's treif. I think it's possible. This is actually negaya to me. Someone's suffering. Nothing else helps. Suddenly I'm curious. So for me, in answer to your good friend, and I appreciate the question, I'm masupik what is the best way of dealing with this, but I find a certain kind of noise in the background while tolerating it for many years, and it's really destructive. I thought, why don't we drag it into the light and address it transparently and open, show that we're not afraid to. And I think there's some negativity on that, and I think there's a lot of positivity from that. And I'm still learning the best approach. If you or your friend has a better eitzah, I'm happy to hear it. But the answer is not only ignore it all of the time, because I don't think people realize how destructive it is and the things that people are doing behind the scenes. So Shave Vial Tasseh has been good for 10 years, but I'm not sure it's the only path to take in the future.
No, it wasn't my question. It was his, and I thought it was important as a fan, someone who's a big fan of your work and someone who benefits from your work.
Do you disagree? Do you have a better answer?
So I'll tell you, I have some experience with this because I pushed up against various boundaries.
Right.
So the first one and the strongest one that I dealt with was certainly with JCW. I was board member of JCW. We were doing events all over. JCW, Jewish Community Watch, we were bringing awareness on child sex abuse.
And?
We were banned from communities. We were banned from, we had...
Because you're dragging the stuff out into the open and to be Kol Hashem, that kind
I'll
of
give you an example.
That kind of line?
We did different things with it. Some were more humorous, which were good, always good if you can get one of those.
Right.
I'll give you one story. So there was someone who's been very, very supportive of our work then was Rabbi Blau from YU.
Mm-hmm.
So his son is in Cleveland. And we were going to do an event there, and he was going to do it in his shul. And he started getting tremendous pressure about having it in his shul. And he called me. I remember if his father called me or he called me. And he's like, listen, I told you I'm going to do it in the shul. I'm willing to do it in the shul. I'm just letting you know it's not just verbal pressure. It's one of the main donors and everything else. I said, listen, there's no reason.
The line is what? What's their resistance?
Then, at the time, there was all sorts of criticism. We don't have proof. We're just destroying people.
That's right.
It's lashon hara. It's this,
this kind of stuff. Gotcha.
And the obvious, if there was no proof, where's the lawsuit? Where's the, you think we're careless? Right. Think about it in this way, right? Let's say there were 50 people who were exposed by JCW. And then they took a risk on one that was like a question mark. And that one ended up being disproven.
But there's 49.
Then we would have been meaningless on the other 50, right? So that was always balanced against those things.
Right.
Also, we were, it wasn't, I didn't deal with that side of it. Mayor Sewell dealt with that side of it. Mm-hmm. But he was actually quite careful in the way he did it. So I'm not going to share his process because it wouldn't be fair, but it wasn't only him who made the decision. And I've watched him argue with people on the phone when he had the power in front of him just to press the button. And he's like, this person must be. And he had different people, including one who was a district attorney in the United States. So he had rabbinical and legal, and he had others. And no. Like one of them said no. It's like, I'm not doing it. So I watched that battle. And then at the same point in time, being accused of we're careless and it's lashon hara and the Rebbe didn't speak about sexual abuse, whatever else, right? All sorts of things. So in this case, I told Rabbi Blau, I said, listen, there's no reason for you to go through that. We'll rent a room in a hotel. We found a Marriott and we did the event there. It turned out when we were there was someone who was very negative towards us, very wealthy guy who was very, very negatively opposed to us. He's passed away since, but he ended up showing up at the event. So we invited him to, like you said, some of the tongue-in-cheek stuff that we did. So we invited him to speak, to share something. So once he was there, he wasn't going to resist the microphone. He stood up and said something, and he spoke. He was passionate about the cause, but, whatever.
His concerns.
What a lot of people said is like, who is Mayor Sewell to do this work? Who is he? What I always said is like, where's the guy willing to take his job? I don't know anyone. Yeah, exactly.
He's stepping up. Who else?
You want to put a microscope on his life? Okay, we can put a microscope on everyone's life. I don't know why you're choosing to put a microscope on his life. Like we have there's a real issue here, and there were so many people who were abused and no one talking about it. Anyway, I'll fast forward to the point. There were others. There was an event in LA where the rabbinical board over there said to people they can't come. They absolutely can't come. Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't finish this, so we ended up taking a video. We had videoed all events. We'd put that out afterwards. We'd put the video of the event out afterwards, like a short clip, 2 or 3 minutes. We did this event.
I saw that. All right.
So when this guy got up to speak, we made him the thumbnail of it, and the tagline was very supportive. So we did some things like a little bit tongue-in-cheek, like that. So some of it was humorous, but then my wife and I, we dated, separated, went through a long journey. We actually reconnected over a JCW event. So when she started coming, she told me, why are you defending yourself so much? And what happened is because there was so much criticism coming at us, oftentimes when we use the events to kind of like respond back to the criticism and fight back against it. And my wife is like, Ellie, it's beneath you. Like, what you guys are doing is life-saving work. Like, don't go there. And what I realized is there's definitely a balance. Like, on the one hand, there's space for it.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm bringing an event on sexual abuse awareness, I don't need to answer the critics there. I have to make one. I have to answer one line.
Event.
Right. Meaning it's
Let
not.
the event serve its purpose.
It started
as
becoming
it
our whole identity. Like, we're fighting back against these noisemakers.
Right.
Like, we became very, very defensive identity. And I don't remember Mic Drop. I dealt with Mic Drop. Got a lot of pushback there over really funny stuff. We did an event where women were going to speak, and some rabbi said it's not tznius, and without ever calling us, without ever saying anything, they socked in. No one can go to the event. Obviously, it brought a lot of curiosity, a lot of awareness. When we reached out to the basin, it wasn't so much for me, but for the other guy I did it with, like, this was his livelihood. And I was like, how are you ruling on something without hearing about what we do? You know, and others people call us a cult and these things. And in that, I took a much different approach. Like, I responded once, I said my point, my piece, but I respected also, I felt like with Mic Drop, there was a truth in what they were saying. Meaning the message was, we were sharing personal stories, and I got very excited about the power of personal stories, but it was getting very dangerous very fast. Like, it was growing into, like, yes, there's space for it, and there's space for someone to work through their journey and their process, and at some point in time say, I'm bringing this message back.
Right.
But when everyone is popping up and saying, I want to share my story, I want to share my story.
It affects a lot of things.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example of this. At one JCW event, I was trying to make a point and say, like, how many people are sexually abused? So I keep hearing this, you know, I keep hearing this thing about it doesn't happen to that many people. It's not a big deal. Why are you talking about it? I said, there's so many people in this room that were sexually abused. And I said, if you're comfortable, stand up. Like, if you're comfortable, stand up. And it was like 7 or 8 men stood up and 1 woman stood up at this one event. It was one of our first ones. And I said, I'm just going to let you know the statistics say there are more women than men who are abused. And I left it at that. One of the guys who stood up at that event checked himself into a psych ward within a week. He wasn't prepared to stand up in front of a room and share that element of a story, but in the moment he did. So when we got a lot of criticism in the basin and everything else, I stepped back and said, okay, what's this? Like, what's the message for me? There's all this on its surface, they're wrong and they're doing it the wrong way, but is there some sort of message that I can pull from it? I responded back to the criticism once and moved on. With the House of More, we got a little bit. It didn't stick. Some of the same stuff about Avodah, but, you know.
I think when I'm listening to what you're saying, and I think for not all people this is true, but for a lot of people it's true, we can sense when someone is, and I think as I'm having this conversation, I'm processing this in real time. You know,
yes.
This whole thing of putting out responses to the controversy and addressing things, I felt it was very actually empowering to do it, because I always just felt this is my burden that I have to carry. But at some point you're crippled under it.
Right.
It's burdening you, and you're just like, this is ridiculous. Why are we fighting these battles with invisible people that are blowing up our students and our relationships?
Right.
Well, we're clearly doing work, and they won't even step into the dialogue. Fine. As I'm listening to what you're saying, the empathic, spiritual, inner person of me just is kind of like, keep going and ignore it all. And that's like the Zen path. But I'm not sure it's strictly true from a Torah's perspective. And I feel like I'm trying to explore something else. And as I'm listening to you telling the story, what's occurring to me is there's a way when you push back with ego and anger and pain and frustration. And that's when people can hear a defensiveness. And I think that's when it kind of is not necessarily a good look or vibe. But there's another way to do it, which I think is a good way to do it, which is without ego or defensiveness or anger. It's just kind of saying, there's a bunch of information. Let's clarify that information openly. And I actually think that feels empowered and clear. And it's better than that kind of victimhood. I'll just hold everybody's pain and carry it, which is kind of my old way. But I'm learning a lot about, I wouldn't claim to be a Jewish leader, but a lot of my journey lesson years of what does it mean real leadership? What does it mean to be a manhig? And part of what that means is when you do something meaningful, powerful, and unique in the world, a lot of people go, wow, thank you. And even more people go, what the heck are you doing? And try and shoot that down. And what does it mean to have das and dveykus in that space?
Right.
And one of the things that I think there's something in me putting out all those responses, really profound shift in leadership to be publicly, openly communicating what is our intention, what are our goals, to use the knives coming at us to say, let's use this as opportunity to clarify, now there's interest, who are we? What do we believe in? What is the value we're doing? And if I do that from Das and Devekut with a sense of joy and just clarification, I think it's actually a fantastic thing. And some people go, why are you defending yourself? That's really clarifying things. A few people said to me, those people, they don't understand what you're doing, they never understand what you're doing. I'm not speaking to them, I promise you. But if you start pushing back too much and it becomes a part of your character, and every podcast you're talking about it, which I didn't bring up this time, but good, then I think people kind of go, why do you feel?
Yes.
It's not what people say, it's how they make you feel. I feel like he's on the defensive. I feel like there's an aggression there. So what I've clarified now is I should be doing this stuff, but without ego and control and without defensiveness, and more like, let's use this as an opportunity for transparent communication and to actually explore with joy, this is what we're about and this is what we're doing. And the people that care, I believe, and the people that are open will appreciate that transparency and as an opportunity to learn more about what's happening.
Right. So I'll share one thought on that. And so I guess this is where I handled the most recent kind of controversy.
Is it around House of More?
It's around House of More. Someone wrote, we had a few, but nothing very loud.
Yeah.
Nothing like really stuck, because like at the end of the day, it's a free space. People come out. There's a show there. Like, what are you going to say?
Right.
Like once there's no money element, that takes out a lot of people really like bite into the money element.
I also think you're far away. You're not in the middle of the film community back there. Don't you think that gives you a little bit more space?
Possibly. It's also who I am. There isn't as much to stick. I don't, I don't carry it in that way. But regardless, this, like someone wrote an anonymous letter on some religious platform, anonymous, about different things at the House of More, right? And they'll grab on stuff, and some are like half-truths. Like, for example, one, they like focused on a singer we once brought out there, right? And he's a singer who's like a world medicine man singer who sings like Hebrew songs and Arabic songs and Buddhist songs and kind of like a mix of different stuff, and that's his message. Now, the House of More at the beginning wasn't actually the House of More. It was a space that I used to do events, and at the time I brought him, it wasn't actually a Jewish space. Like, that happened later, that evolved later. Right. But they found some old flyer for an event, and they put that out there, and they mentioned like the different kind of, he's saying about, I don't know, some Buddhist god. Yes, his way of being is to find, like, he has Hebrew songs with Shalom Aleichem and Yevarechecha, and then he has Buddhist ones that are those. It's like, let's bring people together, right? That's his energy. Well, at the same point in time, today we wouldn't bring him to the House of More. Like, that's...
Who are these people out there putting these things together and writing letters about them?
Right. So I'll tell you what I did. Right. So what I said was, I'm going to respond to it, not for him. This person's an anonymous person who doesn't really deserve a response. But there is someone who came last week to a breathwork and knew nothing about any of the other events coming. And here they're hearing about some guy who came and sang to some Buddhist god, right? So let me give a response to him. And even this, I'm thinking, should I go, like on this podcast, I'm kind of going against what I did there, but I think it's important for this conversation. So what I did was I responded back in the forum where that came from. I wrote something.
Rather than globally?
I reached out to the website. Right. At first, they weren't so eager to post something from me, but I knew someone who reached out to them and said, hey, like, or we wrote a response. It wasn't only me. We wrote a response, right? Thinking of the different aspects of what should be addressed. Put it out. They fired another one. I don't think we responded afterwards. Like, that's all. Like, we made our statement. You can see it for what it is. Right. And for those people who read it, they got it. I didn't put it. We have a WhatsApp group for the Like More. I didn't put it on there. Right? This is the first time I was careful in that way.
Bringing up a question to people that don't have the question.
Yeah, like they're there, and like you're hearing like, to me, like what my wife really showed me at the JCW that we were doing was, here you had an audience who was coming out to hear something meaningful about my topic, and instead I vented out my frustration towards the people who weren't seeing me clearly.
That's being off product. You're there you help children is what you're there to do.
And here I am responding. The fact that the event was canceled somewhere else, like, I don't have to mention, here we're having an event, and there was another shul that didn't want to have it. Like, what does it have to do with this one here? I didn't have to mention it.
No, I just want to say, from one leader to another, I hear you, brother, meaning sometimes you're just overwhelmed and you're giving everything you've got. and you're trying to help children, and you have to be taken up by these noise and these politics when you're here to save children's lives. And sometimes I just want to say to you in advance, if you have to vent, you can vent to me anytime. And if you stand up at an event and you like this is what they're doing as we're trying to save children's lives, it's not our ideal model of leadership, but we're human and we're trying to navigate the space. And it's really difficult when you're giving your all to be a contribution where people are nonsensically coming at you. And I just want to validate the other side for a second. It's hard. It's tough. I know you're not asking for that, but it's tough.
It has, but I've reframed it in one way recently. So a few weeks ago, actually a few months ago, I saw a rabbi do a YouTube video on and talking about porn addiction. This rabbi was my Tanya teacher when I was younger. And I was thinking, like, when I was in yeshiva, the only one who sometimes in a back room spoke a little bit about this in the Chabad world was Yossi Jacobson. Mm-hmm. A little, like, not the way he is today, like a little bit, so the struggle you're dealing with in real life, like, someone can actually pretend that Judaism speaks to it. Right? Like, there was one who did it. And when I saw this guy put the video out there on porn addiction, I said, my job is done. Like, I don't need to be talking about porn addiction.
Mission accomplished.
If I'm comfortable going out there with all the risk that was attached to it, I don't do these things, and it's like, it's easy. When the TED Talk that I did went out there, my first reaction was, oh shit, I've ruined my kid's childhood. Because when they hit, I had I think my son was 1 year old at the time it went out, and my daughter was newborn. I'm like, oh my goodness, when they're teenagers, it's like, I couldn't even call Ted and get them to take it down. Right? I'm like, when they're teenagers, they're going to get bullied so horribly. That was like my first thought. And for a couple of days, I sat with that, saying I screwed up my kid's childhood. And after I sat with that a little bit longer, I said, but if it was alcohol addiction, that wouldn't be the case, because we're sensitive to that.
So you speak to that. Right.
So maybe I can do something.
Uniquely dark or uniquely
right. So maybe
dark.
I can do something about changing that narrative and changing the conversation around porn addiction. So now I have a goal that by the time they reach middle school or high school, when they, in the previous world, they would have got bullied for such a thing. Right. It's just understood. People struggle with pornography. And I think today, it's definitely much more understood. So the reframe, to some degree, is that if there isn't some danger, right, then why am I there? Like, for me, if I'm comfortable being on the tip of the spear, if that's part of my personality, that if I believe in something, I'll play. What you said earlier about pushing those boundaries, so
the frontiers.
Not everyone is comfortable pushing.
God, right.
So if you're comfortable pushing the frontiers, then the moment it's not a frontier,
you have to find a new terrain to conquer.
I told this to Mayor Kay the other day. I said, Mayor, I don't think your work is breathwork anymore. He said, why? I said, because you are comfortable. Everyone's doing it now. Everyone's like, I'm not saying you shouldn't do breathwork in our retreats. Of course, it's a modality that he's amazing at. But if you're comfortable pushing that out. So he said, what do you think I should do? I said, you should give breathwork certification courses. He said, why? I said, because it's so freaking bold and it's so freaking true. I said, think about the contrast. You have therapists who are going for 8 or 10 years to heal people, right? And it's true. They're learning something that's important in frameworks and modalities. It's beautiful, and they're getting degrees. But the truth of the matter is that everyone can learn a breath. And if we're willing to do our own inner work, we've gone to certain places, we can take that person there with a breath. And when they go there, we won't be overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't take 8 years and a degree. It takes the willingness to do our own work and a very simple technique, which you can teach someone in an hour and a half. Mm-hmm. And if you have those two things, you too can stand in front of a room and give that. So I said, to me, that's very bold for you to get a certification 2 years ago and today give breathwork certification courses today. Like, that to me is a bold move. And I think that for you and for others who are comfortable being, and for myself, comfortable being on those frontiers, bring it on.
I just want to speak to bring it on. I have heard this rumor that when you're on these very long podcasts, you keep talking, all your defenses come down. And for the first time, I'm seeing that happen right now. It's also now having slept for 3 days. You've got me in the perfect place. If you're comfortable being on the head of that spear, I used to have an image of myself, which used to be terrifying, which is I throw myself off a cliff and then I learn how to fly. And I would do these projects or theater production, things I didn't know how to do. I'd feel compelled or struck by lightning with a vision, Barack Maverick, and I would do them without the skill sets, and I would figure out the skill sets, and it's profoundly exhilarating, and you push yourself forward in many different directions. Every Bal Tshuva has done that at least once with being a Bal Tshuva. But when you say the words, if you're comfortable with that, so anyone that would look at me and my life, what I've accomplished in the world, and I always feel every day I've accomplished nothing, whether you can say that's self-deprecating, I don't know. But when you always think you're the big thing, you're never happy with where you're up to. Fine, especially when you're lying in bed for 5 years.
It's the curse of an entrepreneur.
Fine, there you go. So Julie cursed. But for myself, am I comfortable with it? I'm both exhilarated by it and devastated by it. I'm exhilarated by it that my head always thinks forward, and I'm always looking in hearts of souls. What do they need and what needs to be brought in? And then I bring it in, and later I'm going, wow, this is going to look weird to people, or people aren't ready for this, right? So my nature is to always be thinking forward and thinking future. David Bowie says that line that I love: the future belongs to those who see it coming.
Okay.
And I think that's part of the entrepreneurial spirit, or that's part of, if you look at Rabbanim and Gedolim in the last 100, 200 years, there's Rabbanim who are poskim, Rabbanim that write Sfarim. But when you look at a Baal Shem Tov or rare individuals, they were complete revolutionaries. Baal Shem Tov was the most future-thinking, avant-garde revolutionary. And, before social media, he had 1 million Jews in like a few decades. It's astonishing. It's supernatural. So I realized that me, like you, like other Jews in the world, we are born to be that way. But I can't tell you that I'm comfortable with it, because it's part of my empathic vision to sense what the generation needs, to sense what people need, which allows me to vision and create things and run that forward. And there's a delayed response, also because I'm sensitive. I do care about how the environment's perceiving me. Not even from an ego. I'm egotistical.
No, I know.
It's just because we're attuned to that. Like you and me are good at these conversations because we're both talking about something to say, but we're both attuning to the other. So there's a synergy of there. When you're trying to change a system or change a model or change people's lives, that's profound and beautiful. But then the pushback that comes from that is a kind of secondary response, which I'm not young anymore, but it still catches me off guard. I believe we're doing beautiful, amazing work with all our heart and with all our energy. I'm not saying I'm perfect, I'm not saying I make mistakes. We're giving all we've got to something that's objectively valuable and helpful. And when the pushback comes, it still catches.
It stings, yeah.
It stings.
Yeah,
because we're good at what we do and we are sensitive. If I was emotionally blocked in my past,
it's also something you're passionate about.
It's something you're passionate about.
Yeah.
So for me, all of this is me sharing a little too much, but fine. I can't tell you still I'm comfortable with it. I can tell you that, and I can tell you lots of journeys and lots of experiences and messages I've received about who I am and what I'm here to do. But for me, it's still that issue of, I have to do this, I will do this. But when the pushback comes, am I comfortable with it? It's brutal.
Yeah, that wasn't right.
No, I understand. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, but I'm talking to the fact that I know this stuff is what I was born for, and I know I have the tools to handle it. But it's constantly attuning and constantly chiropractic, knocking myself into place, and that it's both profound, and I wouldn't choose anything else, and really brutal every day at the same time. And it's just learning to hold space for both of those, to do the work that I have to do. And I feel compelled to say this, which is, I was once shown an image in his Bodhisattva. Am I going to regret this?
Probably.
Okay. Would you cut it out if I asked you to?
Yeah, I would.
You're not TED Talks? Okay.
No.
I was once shown an image, and it was like, if I don't want to use the word save the generation, if I could transform the generation and bring it towards Mashiach, but the whole full world will turn against me, would I make that move? And I can see myself from a Haredi guy in a Haredi neighborhood, Haredi kids, whatever. And the pachad v'nor that came over me, like of that decision, it was like this whole energetic influx of rejection, abandonment, all that kind of stuff. When all of that noise settled, it was like, this is what I'm born to do, is help people. And to be not indifferent, but to be focused enough and caring enough, you let it all slip away. Until I found it in that moment, this deep calling, yes. And it went through this wave of intense darkness of the realization before I could rise up and say, of course, because this is what I'm willing to do. And I can draw on the light to find the resilience to do it. Not without struggle, but that's our struggle, fine. And when I said that, this image of the Tzaddikim of Rebbe Nachman, the Baal Shem Tov, well, first of all, good. And second of all, that's what we all did.
Right.
This was all presented to all of us. And third of all, you'll lose them all and get them back in the end. whether you're alive or not at that point. It doesn't matter. And I'm not saying this is exclusive to me, but I just felt like in that moment, it was a kind of an energetic test. Like, where is your focus? What are you really playing for? Are you here to be a contribution more than anything else? And how much is your fear and self-interest? And when you found the will, after difficulty, to step into that and say, of course, this is what I'm here to be a service of, to feel like the Tzaddikim said that, and they all described their own story. And it was like, of course, not comparing myself to them, yes. But I believe many of us are moving that forward. There was a real moment of surrender to be able to step into a true destiny and release the fear around it. And I hope that it pays off. I said to my wife recently, everyone's going to hate me until I die. And they're going to say, he was a pretty nice guy, he was doing good work. And more and more you kind of enter that mindset. And there's a kind of freedom from that mindset where you're just like, let's roll up our sleeves and make a contribution and think less about what's happening around us.
Right.
But it's not comfortable.
No, okay. I agree with you picking on that word 100% because it's not comfortable. You know, I don't get paid for this work I do. The currency that I trade in doing this is those messages I get from people. Often for me, when I get a message from someone that says, I was never comfortable speaking about this and I heard you and I feel like I had a part in unlocking their voice in some way. And that, hey, I can give voice to my own struggle. I don't feel embarrassed to say I struggle with pornography or that I was abused or whatever else it was that someone went through, business challenges. If they hear me talk and it's like, yes, I nearly went bankrupt. And you have people who on the outside are very successful and they're going through tough business challenges and they can't speak to it. And hearing me, and if I get a message like that, yeah, it moves something inside me enough to do this again.
Yeah.
Right? Enough to do this again. And this is the first podcast I've recorded in a couple of months, by the way. You brought me out of retirement. I used to do it weekly. And then I told myself I'm only going to do it when I'm looking forward to a conversation. I'm not going to do it out of I have to put one out every single week. In any case, that the same part of me that lights up when I receive a message like that gets stung when someone says those messages. So 100%, you know, I had a family member, I don't know if they were joking or not, I had no idea, but when they mentioned that, I brought them through the house some more and they said, this is what a house of Avodah Zarah looks like. And yeah, it stung. I didn't appreciate it at all. Like it didn't feel good to me at all. It wasn't what I was looking for from them. I can't say I showed it. I can't say I responded. It just, it stung. At the same point in time, you know, you were talking earlier in the conversation about the Ibor, and then later in the conversation you said about feeling the connection to the Rebbe. Mm-hmm. So there was a journey I had where I was feeling like the house of more, I owned it more as an investment. I thought the property was beautiful and I'll buy it and maybe whatever, who knows. If I outgrow this house, then I can build. I didn't know. I just liked the property. I bought it. And I was like, use this house for, like, in support of something like this. Under the medicine, I thought, like, you're trying to encourage me to do these kind of things. Like, I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm not crazy. I'm not putting my whole life at risk to do this kind of stuff. But it was like, use this house in support of of humanity. Right. And I struggled with what that meant and everything else. In that same journey, I was connecting to, you know, like oftentimes people get a connection to like their past. Where do I come from? What's my name? Where my people? And it was like, I have this Chabad lineage. Like, what is this Chabad lineage? And what I connected to was like almost every single Rebbe risked their freedom in some way, like risked it in order to push their mission. And there was a boldness and a fierceness and a tenacity is I need to cross to the other side of the street. And I don't want to cross in the middle, but I got to get to the other side of the road. Like we'll be cautious and careful, but this road has to be crossed.
I mean, you have to just go for it.
Correct. So there's kind of those aspects of it, and unfortunately, the first person who introduced me to was Yocheved Saidoff, and I'm just remembering a conversation with her years ago where she spoke about like how much it stung when she asked someone for money, and they said no. And yeah, it's like a profound rejection when you put your whole life into work and you want to sit down with someone and they have no interest. But on the other hand, she was like the other side of that was the passion for the cause, that when she did get in front of someone who was a potential giver, she had to be the one to speak. So that's what I meant by it. I didn't 100%.
I'm just adding to what you said, like our good friend Yocheved. in that, well, her gift is her sensitivities. That's why she cares about children. That's why she wanted to establish, right? So that is her gift, but that makes her more sensitive to everything else. Like if I have a gift, I'm sure we have a few gifts, and one of them is sincerely caring for people and sincerely wanting to be helpful. And that means you're attuned to people. That makes, not from an egotistical perspective, but that makes you more vulnerable.
More sensitive, yeah, 100%.
Right? So the strength is a weakness and vice versa.
Yeah. 100%.
And every tzaddik in history has had this decision, which is they're not doing the big thing for the sake of the big thing. They're seeing the thing that needs to be done. And I don't think anyone chooses to get the pain with it, but that's the definition of being a hero, which is you do the right thing despite the consequence.
Correct.
And the consequence is real, but the right thing is the right thing. So that's just something I'm navigating with all the time, as I'm sure you are, and anybody doing something innovative and important. And the primary question is it worth it? You know, I say to my wife jokingly, when we go to Sfat's my favorite place in the world. So we both agree that we're going to retire in Sfat one day. The machlokas we have is I'm ready to retire now. And I say that every time we go there, let's retire. Now, it's a joke because there's no way in a million years I'm going to retire anytime soon, and we want to change the world and we're doing amazing things. But sometimes I look at my wife and go, why am I doing this? It's so hard. It's so difficult. It's such a struggle. It's nuts. I could make good money. I could actually make income. Be a filmmaker. I've got a good business head if I put but why am I poor, and why am I running around the world, and why am I being attacked? And the answer, like any good person does, is because at some point you say, this is the right thing to do, and this is something I was born to do. And you're willing to push through that. It's what we call resilience or emunah. And all the tzaddikim did that. All the Rebbe did that. Like one of the most moving things about learning about, I did that same thing. I had to re-explore who he was without all the dogma around that.
He dealt with a lot of...
Yeah, well, one of the most beautiful, if I was making a movie about the Rebbe's life, it was right at the beginning, his resistance to being a Rebbe. And his struggle to literally just step into the room and speak. And even when the family attacked him, the claims that he went and did his own thing and he wasn't being true. Like I'm not saying to disrespect him, there's a kid in there, like we all are, who had to do courageous things, who didn't want to do it, and had to find his way in. We know the punchline, he became this extraordinary leader. Being a Talmud Chacham when you're young and being an extraordinary leader are not automatic follows on. And there's these very beautiful scenes in the biographies and speaking to some of those people of him really trying to find the courage just to step up and lead.
Right. Here, like some of the cognitive dissonance that I talk about growing up in Chabad world is actually that story. Of one of the like highlights of it is that story from 1950 when the previous Rebbe passed away till 1951, exactly a year later, when the Rebbe took leadership.
And they're pushing him into it, and he doesn't
want it. So when people hear of that struggle, hear you talking about it, they'll recoil. Many people who grew up Chabad recoil because the Rebbe struggled in any way, had an internal struggle. But the only alternative is to say it was a game and a farce that for a year he refused to step in.
Like, I'm going to be the leader.
Yes. Either he was playing some...
I'm playing hard to get.
Right, exactly. That's the only two choices there. That it was
why
true...
Why do we have to make a person into a god? I don't understand that.
I think it's...
This is the classic line. His greatness is because he overcame those things.
Right. I've spoken about it many times.
And he must have had vision. He's a genius person. He was an incredible, knowledgeable person. And he must have looked around and said, this would be my shit if I was running the show. There's no way he didn't. If I was running the show, this is what I want to be done in America. This is my hashkafa. No visionary makes up a hashkafa overnight. It was obviously boiling within him for years, right? But then when you're told it is your job and your position, anyone who's authentically humble, anyone who's authentically aware, like Chazal warned us, do not step into positions of leadership. If he's fake about these things, he could fake it. But he realizes the responsibility. He has questions like everybody about his own capacity. And that's what makes him great, is that he overcame his obstacles. He found his voice.
To me,
that's extraordinary. And as leaders of people, we are leaders, but we're trying to do things in the world. We recognize that voice.
The struggle is exciting.
The struggle is exciting and it's difficult. And some days you feel my vision is genius. I'm going to change the world. And sometimes you feel, what am I doing? This is nonsensical. Why should I trust in my own voice? Maybe I'm wrong. I'm a visionary guy doing a lot of amazing things in the world. And 10 times a month I'll go, maybe I'm wrong. Right? And that's what makes it awesome. And because he's an extraordinary tzaddik, for sure he went through that. The Baal Shem Tov did that. All the tzaddikim did that.
Yeah.
Why are we stealing him of that true godless? And we know what the
Yeah,
answers are.
it's a rhetorical question. Yeah, it's a rhetorical question. I mean, I grew up in that, and it's true and it's real. And it was one of the things that frustrated me up until what the medicine helped me to do was separate the Rebbe from the story that I heard. And say, like, those things were projected on me as him. They weren't him. He never said it to me.
This is the culture of Chassidus rather than the reality of Chassidus.
Yeah, just what I saw.
But there's a culture that surrounds things, which is much lower than the thing itself. If Cook speaks to these things about the value of heresy at the end of days, that Torah after thousands of years in exile will have a kind of false version of what God is, a very superficial, dogmatic version of what God is, of what Ruchnius is. And the value of heresy, of atheism, will rise up to purify our mind of the external beliefs so we can once again see true divinity and light. And I feel I'm not here to criticize or judge, and it's easy for me to say these things as about Tshuva. Because I was never a Chabad Chassid, I can celebrate with joy and light Chabad Chassidus. But when you get into the cultural part, and you begin into, we have to hold the Chassidus together, the community together, what are the values that do that? And some of those are holy, but some of those are just human. And that's when there becomes a deep disconnection. Like I would say, the most radical thing I'll say on the podcast, and someone will check me for saying this one day, but sometimes I feel if the Baal Shem Tov would come into the world today and see Chassidus, he would be concerned it was literally the complete opposite of the movement he started.
So I heard this as an actual Baal Shem Tov story. But you know what people say about Baal Shem Tov stories, but this story that the Baal Shem Tov was crying and someone asked him why, and he said he had a vision of where his movement would go. And it was so painful for him.
I'd love to see a source for that. Sometimes when I teach Chassidus, I call it Primal Chassidus. I really like that name. I think it's a cool name, which is just to teach what they were doing then. And sometimes I feel the Baal Shem Tov gets a lot of nakas from it, and sometimes I feel like he's defending his people that are sticking by him, even if they're not always at the deepest alignment with that. But I feel that there's something underneath the noise of history and underneath the stories that we've told ourselves about what our Rebbe is and Chassidus is, which is the living Torah, the living experience. There's the stories we tell about it, Tzaddik, and then as you did in your holy work, you strip off the cultural phenomena and all the cultural, the tribal think of that, which is there to protect the core, but it can become, the tuffle can become the ikka.
Yes.
And you have to once again find. I had an interesting dialogue with, we're going to get shecht if this up, like being by Kivvei Tzadikim, like I'd go to the Rambam and try and dialogue with him. I felt very angry at the Rambam. He denied Chassidus and Pneumis Torah, and did he not know it, was that? And there's a whole way you can build a true relationship and find out what is the essence? Who were these leaders? What were they thinking on the inside? What they were trying to achieve? And that process of what you did with the Rebbe, which is step away from the narrative and open that up and find what is the authentic reality. That's what all of us have to do in the times of Mashiach, in our relationship with Torah and Hashem. What is the living, breathing reality under the stories that we've told ourselves about Torah? And some people will leave Torah because they don't like Torah or Hashem, but it's really they're rejecting those hardwired false narratives about it. That's what Rav Kook's saying. And in the right times before Mashiach, there's a word for this. It's a very controversial word. It's in Tanakh. It's called the Torah Chadasha.
Right.
The new Torah. And the Baal Shem Tov defines it as the same Torah, but now the light and the energy and the true relationship will go on in the inside. And we'll strip off all the false understandings of what a Rebbe is, and we'll experience that light and energy. And that's something that will bring the world back home.
Amen. I'll share one final experience, and then we'll wrap this up. So...
what day is it?
I don't know if you're familiar with peyote medicine. You know, the peyote, it's a Native American cactus.
Know of it.
So it actually wasn't on that medicine, but I think that makes the point is the Native Americans really like built their life to protect this medicine. Protect this medicine and this way of life. There's something here. It was gifted to them by a Mexican tradition, and they really, really wanted to protect it. And under a journey, it felt like oftentimes some of these cultures in the Amazon and the Native Americans, it almost felt like they were sacrificing everything in order to protect this, medicine. And there was such appreciation, like as I was going through this and, you know, healing different stuff. And sometimes I've had medicine journeys. I said, I can't imagine being that guy from the day before. I couldn't imagine surviving that with one more minute. Like I would never want to go back. So such appreciation for those who sacrificed for thousands of years, living in very difficult circumstances. I sat in a peyote ceremony with a chief a few times who his tribe was offered billions of dollars for their land, and said, no, like this is our way of life. We're in nature. We're not selling our land. So obviously there aren't too many Native Americans left, right? Those who are there have fought really freaking hard to preserve their way of life and sacrificed greatly towards it. As a byproduct of that sacrifice, there's trauma everywhere in that culture, from alcoholism to addiction to abuse to everything exists. And the flip side is that they've protected something that's unbelievable. And as I was feeling this tremendous gratitude and appreciation for them, I felt compelled to I bow at the feet of all those who've done the same with the Torah, protected this
That's the whole society, right?
So tremendously, with great sacrifice and trauma. And it's it doesn't matter what you offer me. Right. I'm not listening. I'm not open to any other thing. And that's what happens is as some people start talking and sharing experiences, there's so much shutdown because there's been so much resistance. But there's within Chabad, there's a wave of people coming through and just saying it's beautiful that this culture has been able to survive and do certain things, but when we know on the inside that so much abuse happened, that there's addiction, that there's terrible problems with alcohol, it's there's something that needs to shift, and there's definitely an awakening that I see from many, many people. I think it's within Judaism. Right. And what I try to do is listen to those voices a little bit more, listen to those voices a little bit higher than the other voices, which have something to say, but not to...
Beautiful.
Not to detract me.
I think that the last thing I'll just contribute to a beautiful insight. When we spoke about the peyote, this is my understanding of when Belchuvas complain about heretic societies and the problems within the societies and the challenges the society faces. Incredible, beautiful, thriving of Torah and the societies, but there's certainly challenges. And my understanding is when you look at the Torah community today, what you're seeing is a supernatural time capsule. You're seeing a group of people that had a supernatural gift of wisdom, of a path of dveykus, of Kabbalah, of Hasidus, of the understanding of reality. And in a supernatural way, they hunkered down to protect it at all costs. I'm terrible at sports metaphors because I never like sports. I'm not American. But when someone's running across the field and everyone gathers around them and pushes everyone out of the way, what would that be called?
That would be like in rugby, so I'm not sure.
Rugby, so fine. So in Sterling Mills, it was called shepherding, someone's running through and you're pushing everyone out of the way. So the light of Hashem, the light of revelation, the light of prophecy, the light of Chassidus was coming down for 2,500, 3,000 years. And the Haredi society is the result of the protective mechanism. They're disconnected from the external world. They're 100% focused on Torah. You can say, should they be serving the army? Should they be working more? I'm talking about Israel especially. They're not into that. Are they right or they're wrong? But they have dedicated their hearts and souls to protecting this. By the time we get to this year, there's all kinds of problems in the society because of that. And you can talk about what they are, whatever. And I always say it's because, you can criticize them for being so insular, but it's because they did that a supernatural path of wisdom, of revelation, of connection, of healing, came through. And I always think just before we got to the end of history, Hashem jettisoned out from that team a whole group through the Haskalah of people that Baal Teshuvas suddenly come from the outside in and go, what is this time capsule?
Right.
And then they go, hey, this is a path of meditation, of transformation, of healing, of the wonders of Torah. And then we criticize the Haredi society. The only reason you have access to that is because these people gave everything to protect it throughout all of time.
Yes. And then the flip side is both. There has to be an openness, I think, on both sides.
Right. But then if we can find a bridge between the gift of tradition and the light of revelation, to have the authentic understanding of 3,000 years, to have a whole new, fresh perspective of what's needed and relevant now, then that's where the two waters meet. That's where the synergy can open up to the end of days. But all I was saying, the guarding of peyote is the sense that something is so sacred that I have to sacrifice for it. Is very profound. And we can receive that gift and work with those people to open that up in whole new ways. And I think that's part of the Geula Torah, the Torah of Mashiach, is bringing that Torah, the Torah Kadasha, back to life in a whole new way with tremendous gratitude and a hakaras hatov to those that have traveled through it with time and protect it and contain it.
Right. I growing up in Crown Heights, the worst thing, both my parents were Baal Teshuvas. The worst thing you can tell either of my parents was that they were Baal Teshuva.
Yeah.
Because to be recognized as one was was the worst thing. And I think that was one of the main failings of the Chabad community, was that I think it should have been embraced.
All about Shiva communities, same thing. Same
wholeheartedly. I had this, this wasn't on medicine, but just like this, recently we had a daughter February time. And leading up to that, my wife decided to make the house kosher. And we've been on like somewhat of a journey, like me in one place, her in slightly another. We both came from backgrounds. So it's been like an interesting journey. And when that happened, my wife is very, very passionate about food and like the ingredients, like down to like the details, right, of every ingredient. And I felt the need to share with her, like, as you go into kosher, like, don't forget what you learned. Like, don't forget that, like, very passionate discernment over the particulars of ingredients. Just because there's a kosher symbol on that doesn't mean you should lose that. Like, some of the food that we call kosher is not food, so they don't call it non-kosher, but it's poison. It's like should not be consumed.
Take the best
by
of what
human.
you had before
Exactly.
and integrate that rather than pushing.
Exactly. So instead of walking in, and the insight that I had was like, instead of walking in to this culture and saying, oh, I have nothing to share because you're kosher and I'm not, it's like, no, I've sat there and dabbled with the best of food that exists.
Contribution.
The best. Not she's ate. She's truly enjoyed the best meats and the best chickens and the best stuff from all walks of life. And now she's saying, I'm willing to walk away from that. But which means in some way that you didn't get overwhelmed by the darkness of food, and you've danced with it. Right? You've danced and you haven't gotten overwhelmed. So when you walk in, don't just assume, oh, like they know what's good food and they know what isn't. Like what you should bring back in is the best of food within kosher. Like that can't be lost. And I think that when I had that awareness,
that's true with all the work that we're doing, is take the best and integrate that.
Right. When I had that awareness, it was like I felt like my parents and the whole, like the Baal Tshuva movement, by trying to become like the from birth, instead of saying like, no, we've danced with demons and survived. Like, we have something to teach you too. Like, we're going to like do this together. If half the community is made up of Baal Tshuvas and the other half is made up of
this is a very deep history. Now we're going on forever. Don't you have a doctor's appointment 2 hours ago?
I already canceled.
I have a lot to say about this. We can keep it to the next podcast. But the core thing for me is, did Hashem make a mistake when he made all these non-religious Jews he had to bring home? And they were just like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to make you born in the secular world. So now deny that, push that away, and now be ultra-Orthodox all day. Like, was that a mistake of Hashem? So we don't believe that Hashem makes mistakes. And therefore, why did Hashem make generations of non-religious people to come back? And according to the Devekut and the Baal Shem Tov and all these teachings, is because the souls go out in the world to make gerim, to raise nitzotzos. And nitzotzos could be medicine, it could be science, nitzotzos could be breathwork, it could be all your secular experience that is somehow needs to be mashlim the world of Torah. It's not like the world of Torah is perfect without any issues. And there's a way to become a Baal Tshuva without belief in Hashem, which means the last 25 years of my life were terrible hell, and now we learn Gemara all day and everything is perfect.
Right.
Number one. Alternatively, a more profound way to look at it, according to Hasidus, is that Hashem sends out souls to integrate and learn from those skill sets. Hashem creates souls born in Mesharim to be deeply immersed in Torah and Halach and Gemara, and brings them back together so they are mashlim each other, they contribute to each other, expanding the soul of Klal Yisrael, expanding our skill sets and sensitivities. The Vilna Gaon said you can't really know Torah until you know math and science. He made a siyum of all secular knowledge. So he also says that's part of the messianic idea that all secular wisdom and Torah wisdom will unite together. So I really believe a big mistake in all the Baal Tshuva communities, which is discussed, is the sense that I will not be accepted as I'm a Baal Tshuva and I have to completely integrate into the religious community. Not only is it unhealthy, it just doesn't work.
You mentioned that when you did it, I didn't pull on the thread, but I thought about it, was that you were depressed, right? There was a period of time when in that story where the guy said to you, you can take pictures at weddings.
But that was part of my
You were depressed.
Struggle. I was just depressed because I was a spiritual seeker there. I had my awakening in a Buddhist meditation retreat, and then I'm learning Gemara with a bunch of accountants
and then you're
and lawyers, and that's the only reality.
Right.
But where's the rest of me? Now, I felt that that was a failure to bring that up because the rest of me should be learning Gemara, and I love learning Gemara. But where's the rest of me? But from a Hasidic perspective, everything that you have, everything you are, all your history should be brought to the table in your avodas Hashem. And if we would take the business entrepreneurs and the scientists and the healers and bring them back together with the source of Torah then Klal Yisrael would be much more expansive and profound and successful across the board.
Right.
So rather than telling Balchivas to negate their past, Hashem created your past because you have a gift and contribution to add. And both sides need to appreciate that. We need to appreciate the value of the Torah world and the authenticity and commitment and integrity to that.
Yes.
But we all have to see every single one of our journeys was exactly what Hashem needs to perfect Klal Yisrael and to perfect the Shekhinah. And if Balchivas could humble themselves to learn to an authentic way, but value their experience, to say, what can I add to our people through it? For me, I'm 100% sure that's the path of Mashiach.
Yeah, I very much appreciated that you said that. Well, you had some words that would make some Chabad people bristle about the Rebbe, that you recognize that your work doesn't exist without his. Like you're standing on
I
his
didn't
shoulders.
before, and I think you came to teach me that.
Yeah, right. It's it's easy to forget where we came from.
There's a Rav that said, a famous Rav in America, he said to me, banged on the table in his office, he's not Chabad. He said, those Rosh Hashivas, that children would not say Shema today without the Baba Rebbe. And whatever that line meant, it went, I hear that. I hear that.
Right.
I didn't then, but I get it now.
Right. Okay. And hopefully those who may have harsh thoughts about what you said will hear that statement. Because what I found over and over... I will
respond to that in a long public...
what I found over and over is the truth is in that, like, expanded, set, like, down to this absolute, this way to see something for what it is, and at the same time...
I think that's called critical thinking.
Or das.
Das. Exactly. Touche.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate you coming out.
So now we do know each other.
Now we know each other. Now we met, and we met in a good way. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Without medicine.
Exactly.